This is the select board meeting of Saturday, December 10th. First of all, I'd like to welcome back all our board members. This is the first time that we have met together in person for just about 2 years now. So it's kind of nice to be back together and to see all of you in person as opposed to on Zoom. The sole purpose of our meeting this morning is to interview the 3 finalist candidates for the position of town manager who've been put forth by the town manager search committee. And the first thing I'd like to do is to thank and acknowledge the members of the search committee. They have worked tirelessly in a very short time period to review the candidates, to interview them, and now to put forth the 3 finalists. I have to say it was a terrific committee. Everybody worked really hard. Everybody came really prepared. We had many different perspectives and voices, and I think that the candidates that we are interviewing today are sort of the best of whom applied to the committee. So,
should we say the pledge?
We should say the pledge.
Okay.
See, it's been 2 years, okay, and I forget. So yes, we should say the pledge. Thank you for reminding me. So, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Just to recap for everybody as to the process and how we got here this morning. In September, the Select Board engaged the search firm of Municipal Resources, Inc. to assist us in our search for town manager. And we also appointed a search committee that included 9 members and 2 alternates. I will say that, in essence, we were an 11-member committee. The alternates participated fully and completely and were part of the process the entire way. In conjunction with MRI, who interviewed all of us and the committee, we developed a profile for the town manager's position and also a community profile. Those documents and the position was advertised by MRI, and we received 26 applications. MRI did the initial screening, and from that screening, 15 candidates were chosen to move forward in the process.
Starting route to Andover.
Those candidates were then given 3 essay questions to answer, which were developed by the committee and MRI. Of those 15 candidates who got the essay questions, 1 chose not to respond, and 3, after conducting interviews and further investigation of those 15, 3 more were chosen not to move forward. So the committee then screened what we had, 11 responses and 11 candidates. The committee met. We went over their submissions, the answers to their essay questions, and from those 11, the committee chose 5 candidates to interview. Those interviews were held on December 1st and December 3rd, and from those interviews, the committee unanimously selected the 3 candidates who will be here today to interview. The process today is that the board will interview each candidate for about 50 to 55 minutes. Questions from the public are not going to be entertained, and at the conclusion of all of the interviews, this board will then deliberate and discuss the candidates and hopefully come to a consensus as to whom we would like to make an offer to the position of our next town manager. And after that, with the assistance of MRI and the board, will enter into contract negotiations with the selected candidate. So with that, Buzz and Bob, I believe that we're ready for the first candidate, who is Matt Hansen.
Thank you. That's you. That's the hot seat.
Good morning, everyone.
What is that?
Madam Chair, members of the board, this candidate is Matt
Morning.
Hanson. Currently, he's a town administrator / town manager soon in Tingsboro, population of about 12,400. He started in Tingsboro in 2015 as the assistant TA, became the TA in 2017. He has some prior working experience here in Westford. Matt has a master's degree and a bachelor's degree, is MCPPO certified, as well as being a member of both the ICMA and the MMA. He is familiar with Westford. He lives in Chelmsford, and again, works as the town administrator, town manager in Tingsboro. Let's see.
I'm sorry, could I
He
pause
had
you?
6 years.
Should you use the microphone for people at home?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
He does have 6 years in a position like yours in Chelmsford as a select board member. So, Matt Hanson.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome, Matt. I think, I know you know a couple of us, but just so you know who you're speaking with, if we could just go around and introduce ourselves.
Yeah, John Cunningham. Good to see you again, Matt.
Morning, yes.
Scott Ableton.
Andrea Penner-Sweet.
Tom Clay.
Morning.
Anita Tona-Kringwin.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, and welcome.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for coming, for coming back in and giving up another Saturday morning.
Thank you for inviting me. Thanks. It's on this.
Matt, can you tell us something about yourself that is not on your resume or the submissions that you have submitted to us in the application process? Something that we don't know, and it can be anything. It doesn't have to be related to your professional experience, but something that you think you'd be interested in.
Right. That question really threw me off when you asked it during the subcommittee meeting. But first, good morning. I have been thinking about that question since you had asked it previously. I said something more job-related in the first interview, but the more I thought about it, something that's a bit interesting or unique that you may not know is when I was in middle school and high school, I trained a lot in martial arts, and I achieved a second-degree black belt in Kensho-ryu Kempo, and I was also an instructor on the weekends, and at the time I was working towards my third degree. I suffered a rather severe injury that basically ended that career, and at the time, as I was finishing up high school, I was considering opening my own dojo, and I just think it's interesting that that one injury changed my whole life trajectory, and if that injury hadn't happened, I likely wouldn't be a town manager today. So it's just funny how one event or one day can change your really change your entire life.
Thank you. Right. Tom?
Welcome.
Thank you.
My daughter Anna also studied Kempo.
Oh.
She did not reach black belt.
Oh, wow.
You are in a really interesting position. I think we all can learn from each other. All the towns around us can learn a lot from each other, and you've had an interesting point of view as a select board member in Chelmsford and in your role in Tingsboro now and your previous role here. I'm interested if there's something that was a lesson you saw here in Westford that you took to Tingsboro, and if there's a lesson that you see in Tingsboro or in your experience at Chelmsford that you'd like to bring to Westford.
Sure. No, that's a great question. There were several things from Westford that I brought to Tingsboro right away. Westford had a really strong IT department, and they were very good about public outreach and connecting with the residents and push notifications. And one of the very first things I did as the assistant when I went to Tingsboro was to ensure that all of their meeting packets were online and readily available. I was shocked when I started and I realized if anyone wanted the select board materials, they had to come to the select board office and ask the assistant in the office to make a copy. And I just thought that was terribly efficient. So I think within the first month we got those online, and I made it a goal of our IT department to set up push notifications so residents could sign up for things like agendas, meeting minutes, different topics, and anytime we put a news post out or post our meeting minutes, they'd automatically get an email to let them know that something new was available for them. In addition, not something related to the towns, but I certainly learned a lot from Jody when I was here. She was a very strong manager, and gave me a better sense of basically what it took to be a manager. I had been around the table, if you'll say, for a long time as a selectman, and I had interned with Bernie Lynch, but working day to day with her is the first time I really got a much better sense of what it took to be a town manager, and sort of the difference between being the project person versus being the last line of defense, if you will. Something from Tingsboro that I would like to bring back to Westford. I don't have a specific, say, project in mind, but some of the things I've learned and experiences I've had in Tingsboro have shaped who I am and shaped my outlook on things. So when I look at where Westford is now and look at, where the town needs to be in 5 years, one of my concerns that I've seen in Tingsboro is we've had a lot of new growth and business development over the last few years that's really sustained our operating budget. And Westford is the same way. We've had very strong new growth. But the last year or two, coming out of COVID, there's been a major change in the office market, which is a big part of our commercial base and similar to Westford as well. And so I have some concerns about how long we're going to be able to sustain that new growth and what is the new commercial industrial outlook going to be. I don't think anyone really knows exactly what it's going to look like 5 years from now. Obviously, there was a big transition to work from home during COVID, and we've started to move back, but I'm concerned that if that trend doesn't continue and we don't fill up those buildings, it's going to lead to issues about how those buildings get reused. So we're going to have to look at our zoning if that becomes an issue. And then is the reuse of those buildings going to slow down other potential large projects that are fueling the new growth, which is then fueling the services we want to provide the residents.
Anything from Chelmsford from your time there that you thought was done particularly well, or it could be something that you want to make sure we avoid?
Sure. Oh. My experience in Chelmsford was as a select board member, as you noted, and during that time I experienced a lot of the same issues and concerns that Westford is dealing with now, constructing new fire stations, renovating older fire stations and older buildings, things like that. So I think the challenges are the same. The biggest lesson that I learned being a selectman and being on both sides of the table was the importance of communication throughout the community and the communication between the select board and the town manager's office, and the fact that nothing in town will really work unless there's a team effort amongst those two groups, and then good communication throughout the community. And what I mean by that is everyone needs to be on the same page, the town manager and the select board, because if you're not rowing in the same direction, it's nothing positive. You're not going to make any improvements within the town. So I've grown from when I was a selectman to being a town manager, and I often reflect back on those times when I was maybe frustrated with the town manager, or I was concerned about communication and didn't think I was being maybe communicated with enough on a certain issue. And now that I'm on the other side of the table, I can often think, like, day to day, I'll think, oh, that's not important. It's something I'm going to handle. But then I remember back, no, if a selectman hears that, that's going to be important for them to know. So I'm hyper vigilant about communicating to make sure that the select board and the town manager are always on the same page, because those communication breakdowns are, I think, the key, the root of any potential issues that came up. So open communication can really solve a lot of issues and make sure everyone is working together moving forward.
Thanks.
So I have a question about just relationships and people in the community, and I think, as a town administrator, I'm sure you understand that having those relationships are really key with members of the community, and, people build trust, or you build trust with people. And then there are folks who have different agendas or who may ask to be sort of an exception to the rule. How would you protect the town manager's office from people asking for favors, from politics, even at the national level, kind of like seeping in? Everyone has sort of different things that they're interested in, I think, using the town manager for.
Sure. So I think that's a really great question, because the first part of your question talks about the importance of communicating with the residents and being open and accessible. And I think the second part, correct me if I'm wrong, is really about making sure that no lines are crossed and that politics don't cross certain lines. So for the first part of your question, my experience and background, if you've read about it and what I've done, whether it was a selectman or as a town administrator, community building and building relationships is incredibly important. I rely heavily on the select board to develop that policy direction and to be out in the community and to hear things that I may not hear, or to hear different things that I may not hear as the town manager, and to bring me that input. But I'll also be working in the office 8 or 10 hours a day and hear a lot as well. And there's a lot of residents who come to the town manager's office instead of the select board, and vice versa. So that's where communication is important. That being said, you certainly do have to set boundaries. I have to be very clear when I'm speaking to people sometimes, especially when they're asking about, do you think this is going to get approved, or what can we do to make this happen? And I have to be clear that I'm here to facilitate the process, to give you the best advice I can on the steps you need to go through for success in a project, etc. But ultimately, the select board will be making the decision on this, or ultimately the planning board will be making the decision on this. And there are certainly occasions where you say there are several applications or several individuals looking at this project, so there are certain things I can't say to you, and you oftentimes do have to remind people of that. People will often call to ask questions about requests for proposals, and they want additional information. And something very important to remember is you can't tell anyone involved in a project that might have a hand in the pot any information that's not going to then make it publicly available. So what I like to do is say, that's actually a great question. We're going to write that down and we're going to release that as an update to the RFP, so all of the bidders get the information at the same time. Then there are just one final piece, community members that are very active, and sometimes you need to set limits for the very active residents who may want to call and email multiple times a day. I might make a point to only respond to an email at the end of the day, so I know that I'm not going to then get another response or an email that I have to respond to till the next day. So they're sort of getting one response a day, because there are some residents at different points in time that may, as soon as you send them an email, they will respond with another email, and it's consistent, and it sort of doesn't stop. They have until they're 100% satisfied on an issue. And to make sure that I'm not eating up my entire day, I either need to set those boundaries or delegate that issue to someone who can spend a little bit more time with the resident.
Would you have a different approach with staff than community members in terms of, not politics, but just kind of moving things forward, or trying to be like exceptions to the rule, I guess?
I'll say staff often come to our office for direction, and me in particular, when they are dealing with staff members or board members to ask for that opinion. So in that regard, I tend to take those on a case-by-case basis, and what I mean is there's an issue in front of the planning board, and the town planner may come to me and say, this is my opinion, but the board is asking me to do this, I'm not sure. We can do this, etc. And so they sometimes need advice from the management office on what's an appropriate level of involvement in issues that tread on the political, if you will, versus just staff advice. So that happens a lot. I don't quite understand the question as it relates to exceptions for staff members.
Or not really. I mean, it's just because I have exceptions to the rule on my list, and so I kind of keep coming back to that term. But I was just thinking about how do you prevent favoritism?
Oh, okay. Oh, that's incredibly important to do in order to retain trust within all of your staff and to make everyone feel like they're on the same page. If you don't treat your staff fairly and consistently, you'll lose the trust of all of your staff, because people are hyper vigilant about that, I think, in any workplace, if they feel like certain staff are being mistreated. So I know we talked a bit in the subcommittee meeting about the fact that I tend to be easygoing. I'm not a micromanager, but I keep the same high expectations for all of my staff. It's just something that I commit to. I certainly have staff that I think are excellent and excel. And I think they know that, but I certainly don't make a point of making that known and trying to show it off or showing that I have favorites, if you will. That's definitely inappropriate.
John?
Matt, you're going to inherit a a pretty good staff, I think, in town. In fact, an excellent staff. And it really boils down to leadership. And when you had a new leadership, usually it's what kind of tone do they set, what kind of performance example do they give, and that means between the tone you would set with the select board, with the staff, and with the public. Could you describe or give us an idea of what that tone that you're going to set and how you're going to lead?
Sure. There's, leadership is a broad field, but to boil it down to a couple really important things, I think the most important is leading by example. And the most important, I guess, aspect of that is your general presence. As the town manager, people will look to you for leadership, and it's simple things such as showing to work up on time, working hard, dressing professionally, and treating everyone equally. Those are some very important keys. If you don't have that base level of trust and leading by example, then nothing else is going to follow that. And then also, I think my communication and experience, the staff find it helpful. So I'm approachable and willing to talk to them about issues and help them through issues, and my staff always feel comfortable speaking to me, and they don't have to feel shy about asking a question, or if they don't know how to do something, or if they need more resources. They know I'm there to support them. I'm not there to hold them back. I'm there to always help them excel. And I think back to an example about the leading by example, if I could. When I first started in Tingsboro as the assistant, I wore a shirt and tie every day, and it was sort of my expectation coming from Westford, going there, and my boss at the time didn't. He would just wear a collared shirt. And about a week in, he wore a tie one day, and he was kind of smiling, and by lunchtime, he said, what my wife said to me this morning when I left the house? She said, "Your new assistant wears a tie every day, doesn't he?" And he said, "Yeah, he does." And it was just an expectation of me. And at the time before I had started, he was having some difficulties with other staff members that he necessarily didn't feel were dressing as professionally as they could. And he had talked to the unions about establishing a dress code, which employees, at the time, they tended to not be fans of, because there's a lot of subjectivity about what's appropriate and what's not. But the issue never went through to, being implemented any type of dress code. But I started wearing a shirt and tie every day. He started wearing a shirt and tie every day. And I was someone who got out of the office a bit more and talked to the staff, and he started to do that a bit more. And I think, naturally, when we played the part, when we sort of showed what the expectations were, we no longer had to tell someone that maybe a t-shirt isn't appropriate. The issue just resolved itself because I think the expectations were set. I think the same goes with, showing up to work on time, working hard, going above and beyond, applying for grants that may not be in your job description. If administration is doing it, and administration is thanking the people publicly, the staff that are working hard on grants, other staff members see that there's a culture of going above and beyond, and it all starts with leading by example.
Do you have any, if you hit say you're selected to be the town manager, day one, do you come in with any preconceived ideas or plans for change, or anything that you want to see that, in my experience, sometimes the leader shows up and they have an agenda, and do you have one? Do you have something you want to put emphasis on?
So, not in regards to me seeing something that is wrong or not working well or wanting to make a change. I think I agree with your initial statement that I will be inheriting a very good staff here. We talked a bit in the subcommittee meeting about how many of your staff have waited and stayed in Westford for the opportunity to advance because they want to be in this community. They're skilled, experienced. They have a lot of historical knowledge. The town, obviously, AAA rated, great financial team. The town is in a good direction. So from an operational perspective, there may be some things that change through some retirements, but I'm not going to come in like a bull in the china shop with an agenda, if you will. There are certain things that, I'd like to help prioritize, from a bond rating perspective, for example, stabilization is around 6.5%. I would like to see that closer to 7.5% over time, if that's something the select board and the finance committee were comfortable with. So there's some areas from a management perspective that I think maybe could be worked on, and I'm sure they would be mutually acceptable. And then one other thing that I've just started in Tingsboro that I was going to consider bringing, and I referenced that in my cover letter, was a citizen relationship management software. I don't believe Westford has one currently. That's a way to help track citizen interactions among different departments, so different departments can see what interactions other departments have had with certain staff, and it helps work on projects collaboratively and assign projects to other individuals. It also helps you build lists of residents you interact with frequently, so if you need to contact specific business owners, you'll have known what all of those touch points are, and then you can easily reach back out to them. So I'd potentially be looking to maybe expand some communication and outreach and collaboration. But in general, operationally, I think Westford is running very well. It's one of the main reasons why I've applied and why I'm very interested in coming to work here.
That was going to be my third question, by the way.
Oh,
The CRM.
can't see that far.
Customer relations.
Oh,
management,
great.
That's another version of this.
Yes.
Is this going to result in some kind of automated system where you call up and you say, press 1 if you do this, press 2 if you do that, and you need this, and that's, because that's my experience with CRM as customer relations management. I had a good friend that worked in that kind of stuff, and so is that what it's going to look like?
No. But I mean, you're 100% right. I think with the concept that in the private sector it's called customer relationship management, and in the private sector they call it citizen relationship management. But no, I don't. The program that we have in Tingsboro is not based on when you call in. It's based on however you get an interaction, it can be logged in the system. So we have made no changes to our phone system when you call in. But if someone calls into the administrator's office and they have an issue with a pothole that needs to be filled, rather than just transferring them to the highway department, I could create a ticket for them. Whoever answered the phone could create a ticket for them, and the pothole management tool will take their name and address, and it's then tracked in the system who made the complaint, where it is. The highway foreman will then see that, can assign someone to it, and then the resident can see when it was assigned to someone, and then the person who fixes the pothole updates it in the system, and then the resident gets an automatic email that their pothole has been fixed, and they know when and where. So it helps the residents know what is going on with their complaint. Because what happens today, and what's always happened in the past, and what creates a lot of extra time for staff, is that resident calls, and then a week later they call back and say, when's my pothole getting fixed, or has it been fixed, or has anything happened on that? And if a different person then answers the phone, they have no idea, so they have to go check with the highway department. It may have just already been filled. Now with a citizen relationship management tool, if that pothole has already been filled or it's already been assigned, anyone in town hall can pull up pothole on Smith Street and see that, oh, it's been assigned, it's expected to be filled within the next week. So if a different person answers the phone, or someone who doesn't have knowledge of the issue, almost anyone can help that customer now.
So you mentioned we mentioned the quality of our current staff, and in your packet there's a discussion about needs for some succession planning over the coming years. So I guess your first question is, do you have a particular view of promoting internally versus searching externally? And then secondly, if it's an internal preference, how do we go about, or how do you go about attracting the best talent and then developing that talent in the town?
Sure. To develop in the town. So the select board in Tingsboro has always placed an emphasis on promoting from within whenever possible. And I think just in general, even if that wasn't their focus for me, it's important to provide resources to your staff if they want to move up. I'd say most of the staff that I have in my different departments who are at the assistant level, the vast majority of them do want to ultimately make it to a department head level at some point. And, you know, it's well known across town hall that we're not there to hold people back. We're there to train them, so ultimately they can take over if they're ready. Sometimes they're not ready by the time their manager leaves, but they know that they're being supported in that direction. So I talked a lot about continuing education, et cetera. You know, that being said, at the department head level, you can't always promote from within if it's a small department. Tingsboro's a little bit different because we're a little bit smaller. Westford departments are a little bit larger and maybe have more staff support, more options to choose from, more opportunities to train and learn. But ultimately, we want to create that path for them. If we're attracting new staff, I tend to be picky until I find someone who's the right fit. I've had several positions, a town accountant, a town engineer, some difficult to fill positions that I've posted 3 times and waited 6 months or more to fill it permanently, because I don't jump at the first person who checks all the boxes and can potentially do the job. I try to be very conscious of the culture and how they're going to work with the other staff. They need to be understanding that maybe there's an assistant in that office that wants to do the job someday, so I'll then have to ask questions about how comfortable they are training someone and trying to help their new colleague advance. And if that's not a priority for them, if they want to just come in and do the job, but they're not interested in developing their staff, then I'd say they may not be the right fit for the town. So I look at every position individually and look at the structure of the department and really take my time with the hiring process. Often, as a smaller community, we can't pay as well as some of the larger communities that Westford or Chelmsford can have. Westford's a little bit more fortunate that I think you can attract people who've been doing the job. Department heads in towns like Tingsboro often will go to a town like Westford. In Tingsboro, we often have to, even if we're not ready to promote from within, we often have to hire assistants in other towns who are trying to make that first jump to a department head level. So often my department heads, when they first start, it may be their first time fulfilling that job as a department head, and so they need continuous training. So from my conservation department to my accounting, even my engineering departments, we often use some consultants or some additional help to continue to train them when they get started, because I don't want to bring someone in new or green and then have them flounder when they first start. So for my town accountant, for example, when we took David Andrus from you, it was his first time as a town accountant. We had some consultants, some CPAs who were working with us, and you know, for the first 6 months on the job, he'd say, well, I still have a question about this, or I'm not sure how to do this. Can I call them and get some assistance? I say, absolutely. I want you to learn. I want it to be done correctly. I know it's going to cost a little bit of money, but to have you trained and to be doing things properly and appropriately, and to be a successful employee long term, any additional funding you have to spend for employee training is money absolutely well spent. I never want to be penny wise and pound foolish when it comes to training or staff development.
Thanks.
So, throughout all of your experience, Matt, I am sure that there have been times when something that you've done has either not worked out or has been a mistake. So if you could tell us about an experience where you made a mistake and it had, you know, some ramifications. If you could tell us about a time when that happened, and then looking back, how would you have handled it differently, and what did you learn from it?
You know, the first thing that comes to mind, if you want, I can think back to town administration. The first thing that comes to mind is when I was a select board member, selectman at the time. The select board had decided they wanted some free cash to go to reduce taxes, and I was new to the board. It was a priority of everyone, and we pushed the town manager at the time very hard to bring that plan forward. And I remember getting very upset when he brought a budget forward that didn't include any direct tax relief. And several of us were all very upset with him. But then the more we talked through the process after the fact, I realized that we didn't come to him with a plan to sustain that tax relief moving forward. And once he explained to us how if we did this 1 year but we weren't able to contribute the same amount next year, residents would just get essentially twice the tax increase, it really made me realize that I shouldn't be quick to jump to judgment. I had quickly jumped to judgment that he wasn't listening to us. But it made me realize I wasn't the expert in that particular field, and I maybe needed to learn more about the issue before I passed judgment on him. So I think that relates to anything now. I try to be cognizant that I'm not the expert in all different areas. I talked a bit about you have to be an inch deep and a mile wide to provide staff support for all of your department heads. But if there's something I don't know, I'll be the first to admit that, and I'll be the first to say I need to find the answer, I need to get more information on it before I make a decision. So I try not to make any decisions unless I really feel like I'm the competent person in the room to make that decision.
Sorry, could I ask a quick follow-up to that?
Of course, yeah.
How did you resolve that with the town manager individually?
Sure. It was through communication. So it was public the first time we found out that he wasn't going to include that in the budget. And then I don't remember exactly where we were after the fact, but he explained to me individually sort of the whole process in more detail and why he couldn't do it. So it was some direct communication with him.
Did you apologize?
Well, this was a long time ago. We had a better relationship after that moving forward. So it was. I mean, I don't know if I said the words "I'm sorry," but it was understood.
Okay. Thanks.
Certainly, yes. I apologize, Paul, if he's listening now, retroactively. I am sorry. For the record.
Probably listening out there.
Maybe.
So sort of following up on that, since you touched upon relationship with when you were a select board member and town manager, and now that you've been basically on both sides of that relationship, how do you view your role as a town manager or a town administrator vis-a-vis the select board? And what happens when your opinion on a particular issue differs from what the select board believes or is instructing you to do?
Right. That's a great question. That's something I think about a lot. And I'm going to circle back very quickly. When I was a selectman, I asked Paul select board member, sorry, at the time. When I was a select board member, I asked Paul if I could go to some of his Mass Municipal Management Association meetings. And the first one I went to, we sat at a table with a plethora of managers, and one of the first things they started to do was complain about their select board. And the former managers are laughing, and Paul very quickly said, whoa, 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 folks, this is one of my select board members here. And so they kind of laughed and they stopped, and I realized since then, a lot of managers who haven't sat on that side of the table, they get easily frustrated with their select board. They say things like, oh, they think they know everything, and they're not listening to me, etc. And because of my experience sitting on both sides of the table, I do not at all get offended when my opinion differs from the select board. I truly appreciate the opinion and the knowledge about the community that you have and the policy direction that you set. I actually love that I'm on this side of the table now, because being a select board member is difficult in a different way, where you have to worry about if you're doing what the residents asked you to do, if you're going to get reelected. All of those political considerations weigh on your shoulders. At the end of the day, now that I'm on this side of the table, I'm the town manager, I have a professional opinion, and I will always provide that to you and get you all the information you need to make the decisions. But at the end of the day, this is your community, you live here, you were elected to do the job of the chief executive officer. So the location of the new fire station, I may have an idea in my mind on what makes the most sense, but if you've spoken to the entire community and you feel it should be this location, I'm not going to get personally upset about it at the end of the day. I mean, I'm here to advise you. And a good example, I don't recall if I brought this up during the subcommittee meeting, but it was in the paper quite a bit a few years ago. The select board tried to purchase the Tingsboro Country Club when it was going up for sale. It had been a golf course in town for over 90 years. And as a town manager, I was concerned about having to potentially operate a municipal golf course. All the managers in the area, when they would talk to me, they'd say, "Oh, you're not going to purchase that, are you? You don't want to run a golf course. Oh, I know in Groton it didn't work out well," et cetera, et cetera. And I'll say, well, the town is considering it, but my board really wants to do it. And, you know, throughout the process, I liked the compromise plan that ended up being the final result, which was building housing, senior housing on the top half, and then retaining 30 acres of open space. That was, in my mind, a good vision, and that was a vision of a group of residents at the time. But that was my personal opinion. Four of my 5 select board members said they wanted to purchase the entire golf course. So I put together, I solicited appraisals of the land for them. I put together PowerPoint presentations on how it would be funded, what we would do to manage it, and how it could be done successfully, and what the pros and cons were. But I was neutral with it throughout, and I gave them all the information they needed to try to go to town meeting to purchase it. I didn't want to purchase it, but I'd like to think I did a good job of giving the select board the information they needed to try and attempt to purchase it, because it wasn't my job to make that decision. It was my job to give them all of the facts, and then it was a priority for them to try and purchase it.
Thank you.
One of the key relationships is between the town manager and the superintendent and the school committee. And you've got 3 current and 1 former school committee member back there to listen to today. What are some of the things that, maybe you can just, 1 or 2 things that you've seen go wrong, and what you've done to fix it in the relationship between schools and town?
Sure. That is one of the most important, and it can be one of the most challenging relationships. They're obviously the largest town department. I guess to say what can go wrong, I'm going to start with the importance and how things can go right. What I said to the subcommittee is communication is key. I know I noted it in my letter, but if I use Tingsboro for an example, relations were at an all-time low when I started there. The budget process for the school department requesting a budget was for the superintendent to come in with basically a 1-page piece of paper with their new costs and their asks. And there was absolutely no way for myself or the town administrator at the time to analyze that or identify what all of their other revenue and expenses were, and how those new costs reflected basically any other portion of their budget. And it was a complete disaster because there was a lack of transparency and there was a lack of trust. And I think those are the 2 key components, and not just the school department, but with any of the departments. I always want them to feel comfortable that they understand what all of the needs are in the community. That's why I like tri-board meetings, because the school department will come in, the finance committee will be there, and they'll hear from the select board and management what all of the department requests are. And so if they ask for $3 million and the town is saying we can only provide $2.5 million, at first that can sound upsetting, but when everyone's in the same room, everyone has agreed upon a 3 or a 5 year revenue projection, and everyone can see what the 3 to 5 year expenses are, everyone can understand why each of the departments, whether it's the school department or the police or the fire department, may not be getting the full request they're asking for. If that's done in a room with just a back and forth and just saying, I need the extra 100,000, or why can't you give me the extra 200,000, that's sort of a broken process. Major departments that have such a large portion of the budget need to be involved in those discussions, understand the entire budget picture, just like the town manager's office is responsible for knowing what's going across all the departments. I think if we're transparent with the school department about what all the needs are in the town, and you get all of the stakeholders in the room, you can come up with that compromise plan. And compromise sometimes means that not everyone's happy, but if it's done transparently and everyone's looking at the same numbers, that's when you can then potentially debate a little bit about whether we should provide that extra few $100,000 to the school department or another department. Everyone will understand if it's going there, it's coming from somewhere else. Or if there's really a priority for that extra few $100,000, the select board can then weigh that priority, and maybe some of your revenue estimates are a little bit low, and maybe you could be slightly more aggressive and you could fund that program this year rather than waiting until next year. If it's a priority, and that then takes priority over the new police officer or the new firefighter, et cetera.
Thanks.
What does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you?
Sure. I know I touched upon it briefly during the subcommittee meeting, but I think holistically it's about ensuring that all of the town's resources are equitably distributed or being channeled in a way that support everyone in the community. And I know I mentioned, are you paving roads in areas that may have a diverse population or a lower income? Are you providing services in multiple languages? But before you can even get to that, I know what many communities have done, and I think in the goals it says support the DEI committee, and I don't know if an assessment has been done, but there are consultants now who will do an assessment of a community, and they look at everything you do, from your hiring practices, from your communication and outreach. Is your website and your mobile apps available to people who are hearing impaired or vision impaired? When you go to town meeting, do you have closed captioning available? Are your hiring practices and not even your hiring practices, are your job descriptions accurate, or are they requiring degrees that may not be necessary for a job, and are they potentially excluding candidates who could otherwise be applicable to the job? So DEI is a very diverse field, and there are a lot of areas of local government that can be looked into to ensure you're meeting your DEI goals. And I think the first step is really to do an assessment, because I have ideas of things that I know we could look into to make sure our resources are being equitably spent, to look into our hiring practices. But I'm not a DEI expert, and I couldn't do a real formal professional evaluation of all those areas. So that's where I'd be looking for help from the DEI committee and or potentially consultants to tell us what we're doing well and what we're not doing well. And I think that's the first step, is knowing that you need assistance and knowing that there are areas that you're going to have to look into.
Follow-up questions. Okay. Yeah, could you tell us about a time you personally advocated for a DEI issue in the workplace?
I had a candidate, well, is it a candidate, okay, you said an issue in the workplace. A diverse candidate in a job pool that wasn't quite as experienced, but this is back when I just started in the select board, was really in charge of the hiring, and I advocated for them. It was someone I actually knew, and I had personal experience with their work ethic, and I thought they were an incredibly talented individual, and I made my opinion known that I knew on paper they maybe didn't have some of the same exact experience as the other candidates, but I believe that with strong work ethic and talent, you can surpass someone who may have been in a job potentially longer than you. And so, I advocated for that candidate. Unfortunately, in that instance, the select board sort of overruled me and went with another candidate, and I think it turned out to be a mistake in the end.
Okay. If you learned that a member of the community contacted the DEI committee to report an issue where they felt like they were treated differently by a staff member because of their accent, how would you address that situation?
Sure. Resident complaints about staff members, there's sort of a few-step process. First is I like to let the individual reporting the complaint. If it wasn't reported to me, I like to reach back out to them and let them know that the issue is going to be taken seriously and it is going to be addressed. But then I typically end by saying, due to the nature of personnel issues, if there is any type of result or discipline, I may not be able to get back to you and tell you what that result is because that's a privacy issue, but I do want you to know that it will be looked into and it will be addressed. So and that usually, people are usually very responsive to that. They often say, oh, I totally understand, you can't tell me what happens, but I appreciate that you told me you're going to be looking into it. From there, typically, depending on how it was reported or whatnot, we would open an investigation, but for something like that, it can be informal, and what I mean by that is I could ask the HR coordinator or my assistant town administrator to do an investigation, which would be interview the individual and interview any other individuals who may have knowledge of the incident, and then they write up a report, and then they would give it to me. Then typically I would take that report, and if it had some sustained findings, I would then go back to the employee. I would address it with them, and then we would decide whether some type of training and or some type of discipline was warranted. And throughout that process, typically before and after the investigation is done, each time before speaking to the employee, we'll also reference our plan of action. We'll send it to town council to make sure we're following all the appropriate steps.
Sorry.
No.
I know I'm spending a lot of time. Would you go back to, how would you go back to the DEI committee or maybe the individual who?
Oh, so thankfully for the, with the DEI committee, I would be able to report back to them depending on what happened. We could certainly let them know how the investigation went and what the results of the investigation were. So I could say there were some sustained findings and they were resolved. That could potentially, in certain instances, be released, that there were some sustained findings. So I imagine the only thing I wouldn't be able to tell the DEI committee or the resident was the actual discipline that the employee received.
Thank you.
Perhaps sort of related. May I proceed, Madam Chair? What practices do you have to make sure that everybody in town is seen and heard? Sort of from the DEI point of view, we've had a bunch of community meetings during the time of Black Lives Matter protests, and heard that a lot of people in the community did not feel seen and feel listened to. And I think we would sometimes talk to town staff and they would say, well, we never heard this, it was never reported to us, how are we supposed to act on it if we don't know? And I'm sure they were acting in good faith, but yet the problem was there and it was unobserved. So do you have practices you recommend for town or things you like to do to make sure we're active in our listening and seeing?
Yes, you know, that is a really good question because that comes up exactly as you described it. It happens a lot. Well, we didn't know. I can talk a little bit about the things that we try to do for outreach. We try to have various means of outreach to get our message out, and then I'll talk a bit about, you know, how we collect that feedback. We do everything from reverse 911s to message boards to, again, those push notifications that I talked about. We have several board members on the various boards that tend to spend more time on social media, and when they see conversations happening, they report to, you know, myself or the department head, and if it's something they can't respond back to directly or they need more information on, they'll ask us, what's the appropriate response for this? I'm happy to post it if you can't. So at least in Tingsboro, we have some good board members who like to manage a social media aspect, which doesn't reach everyone, but it reaches a lot of people that typically staff members don't see and don't deal with, because most of the staff aren't on Facebook all day. They really only see those staff that they're interacting with. So, you know, I rely heavily on the board members who are in the community a bit more to get some of that information back. I'll often ask them, what are people hearing and saying? What are you hearing when you walk your dog about, you know, the town meeting warrant article on X, Y, and Z? And so we've got a good communication between our board members and our staff. Second part, I think, was more on soliciting feedback. I think every interaction with a resident is a potential touch point to build a relationship with them, and I think that's why building out that relationship management software that I was talking about is so important, and you know, could potentially be beneficial to Westford. We have a laptop set up in our office, and we had it set up right at the main entryway for a while for residents to sign up for our E911 reverse alerts and for residents to sign up for our push notifications. And so when a resident comes in, every time someone comes in and we get the chance to interact with them, we say, would you like to provide your name and email address for push notifications? We have a general news blast, and we also have specific things, meeting agendas. We did it during COVID for COVID specific, if people wanted information specific to COVID-19. So as people are interested in certain topics, they can sign up to get some more interaction with the town, and we know who those people are.
Thanks.
Yeah, just building on Anita's question, since the DEI committee is primarily an advisory committee to the select board, at what point would you engage the select board in any kind of an incident that you've been advised of that fell in that arena?
Sure. No, that's actually a really great question, because that that's actually something that even our labor attorneys sometimes have trouble advising us on, because from an employment perspective, the select board is the chief executive officer of the town, so you technically have a right to all information if you were to ask for it. But there's a strange dilemma where employees also have a right to privacy, and you can run afoul of labor law if you provide information to the select board too early, or you provide too much information that is not relevant to something that they may need to know, you know, for disciplining an employee. It's a little bit different in Westford, where there's a strong town manager already who has a lot of hiring and firing authority. It was a little bit different in Tingsboro. The first one's very easy. If it involves potentially a business or something like that, and I was advised through the DEI committee that a complaint was brought to them that a business owner was not treating residents fairly, I would want that to immediately go to the select board. At the very least, if it's a minor, some type of minor issue, I would at least let the chair know, because, you know, our labor council has at least advised us that there's almost never a conflict of interest, at least letting the chair know. If there's an issue that the whole board may have to get involved in at some point, there are some laws about when you can or cannot tell them some information, but generally my rule of thumb is I like to provide at least a base level of information. Even if I don't say the employee's name, I may say a complaint came in about a municipal employee or a highway employee or a fire employee, about a DEI issue that occurred on the job or occurred off the job. It's being investigated and will be resolved. I may or may not, you know, get back to you. Or I may get back and say it was investigated and the issue was resolved and no action was taken. Or I would get back and say it was resolved and employee was disciplined, but I may not say the employee name. If it was a department head level position, I'd confer with town council, but I would think at that level, the select board would probably need and want to know the name of the employee involved. If a department head had a serious charge of basically anything, we would probably have to tell the select board and say, obviously this is confidential, it's still being looked into. Probably wouldn't share all of the documents along the way, but I would want you to know that a department head is being investigated.
Okay, so we're kind of close on time, but
Okay, sorry.
when things go right, you're really popular. When things go wrong, it's a pretty lonely job at the top. And you could be working 24/7 with all the demands upon you. So I guess first question is, how do you set limits such that you can be responsive without still having a life? And then secondly, when things, you know, you got questions, you got problems, who do you go to get that kind of support or that kind of advice?
Sure. Great question. And the first thing that I come back to is actually my time in Westford. Jody was fantastic at setting boundaries. And I remember John Mangiarotti and I, our emails are going to our phone, and we were, you know, sort of working 24/7. Every time we got an email, we would respond. And Jody would often tell us, I'm going home for the weekend. If you need me, you call my cell phone because I need to unwind. Because when she's on during the week, you all know she's on. She's just on. And for John and I think we weren't used to that. I don't know if it's because we grew up with the cell phone or whatnot. We couldn't put it down. And I learned from Jody that sometimes you need to set boundaries and you need to set some time aside. And so tried to do better communicating with my select board. I'll say, if I had a really long week or I was going to be going away for the weekend, I'll say, I am available, but I will be spending some time with my family this weekend. Call my cell phone if you need me, because my board members tend to call me after hours on the weekends because most of them are working during the day. So they're accustomed to that, and most of the time I don't mind. But, you know, my wife will actually tell me, she'll say, we're going to be going out for the day somewhere. Can you let at least the chairman know so he's not calling, or if he calls, he knows you're going to be busy. And it's important to set some of those boundaries so you can have some time to unwind, because it is a very demanding job, and if you leave it on, you could be responding to emails all day. So I make a concerted effort, you know, to set periods of time where I'm working and periods of time where I'm unplugged. Could you remind me of the second part of your question?
Yeah, who do you go to for advice and,
sure.
and support? Because you're the top guy here, but you have to have your own, is it other, you know, I won't give any answers, but, you know, where do you go for advice and support?
Sure. A group of other managers, depending on the issue, we often talk. I make an effort to go to as many different events as I can, whether it's the Mass Municipal Management Association events, regional events with the Middlesex 3 Coalition, et cetera, where I can bump into Paul Cohen and Jody or Rich Montori and Tewksbury, and that's where we often share our thoughts and ideas and the issues that are going on, and we collaborate and discuss items. And even NIMCOG recently, Jenny Raid, who's the new executive director, she has a vision of regionalization that goes a bit outside of transportation, and I sent her an email the other day and let her know that I really love what she was doing. She set up a meeting with all of the municipal CEOs, and we specifically talked about regionalization ideas, and it's something that NIMCOG has always done a little bit in the past, but she's new, so she's taking a fresh look at it, and we had a few members in person. Even the city manager was there, and it's hard to get him, city manager in Lowell, it's hard to get him to come to NIMCOG or some of these regional meetings. And it was interesting, a few of the regionalization ideas we came up with, he was able to really help with, because one of the things I mentioned was shared equipment that communities may only use once or twice, and obviously Lowell is the biggest community. He said, oh, anytime, just let us know. And there were a few other services we mentioned. We have some one-person departments, like veteran services, and it can be real difficult for our veterans if they want to take a vacation for a week. How do you backfill that? And we had some things in place, and he again said, well, we have a 3 or 4 person veterans department, so if you ever need assistance or someone to help, let us know. And so I really wanted to thank Jenny for reaching out and helping to bring the managers together again.
Last question.
Oh, okay.
If you're selected as town manager, as you know, you're following in the footsteps of a highly respected and well-regarded town manager here in Westford. She's been here for 14 years. She's been very involved in our community and very accessible. Consequently, I think you can expect when you start to face daily comparison to her. And from the staff, from residents, and probably anyone who's interacted with her. And perhaps the first time you try and do something that's different than what she's done, you're going to hear, well, that's not how Jody did it. How will you go about handling this, and what will you do to establish your own management and leadership style?
I think that's a great question. I'll be curious if someone mentions that to me, like that's not how Jody did it. I'd be curious to know, well, how did Jody do it? I don't go into something thinking my way is the only way. If I can find out how she was doing it, maybe there was something better, or maybe there's something in the middle. I would explain to the individual, oh, I wanted to do it this way because I've seen it work out. And then when they explain how Jody did it, I'll either be able to say that actually makes a lot more sense, or if it doesn't, I'd explain why I think my way is a little different, or potentially may work better or not. I think my experience, you know, whether it's interning with the city manager in Lowell or working in a smaller community and being on both sides of the table, I have that broad background that I think will help me hit the ground running. Jody is leaving big shoes to fill. I don't expect I'll do everything the same way as her, but I do want to hold myself to the same high standards. I think I have a reputation of doing that. And I know the staff have been poking around. I've heard from a number of my department heads that their relevant department head in Westford has called them. I won't name them all, but there's been several of them. So the staff have been checking up, and I'm hopeful that if anyone has heard anything negative from anyone, that would have got back to you. And if it hasn't, I'm assuming that most of the staff have got a comfort level from reaching out to the department heads, or whether it was through Bob. Hopefully the staff will feel comfortable, comfortable with me stepping into those shoes.
Do you have any questions for us?
Questions? Just very quickly, about how much time do we have?
Not
Not a lot. Okay. I'm just going to ask one then. I know one of your questions to the town manager applicants was, how will you judge your performance after the first year? But I have essentially the same question for you as far as judging the manager's performance. What are you really hoping that the new manager will accomplish, and do you have some certain criteria for success that you're going to use when judging their performance for the first year?
I think the first thing we would probably do is, well, just to go over the practice that we have now. So we do have a pretty thoughtful process that we go through to establish goals, and we, maybe there are too many on the list sometimes, but we do, we really try to be thoughtful about that. So I think with the new town manager, very early on, we would say, here's what we want to do. First of all, we want to continue stability. We want to retain the great team we have. We want the new candidate to have a chance, new town manager to have a chance to listen. I don't think we'll be pressing for any immediate changes. I don't think we have any unmet needs that we have behind some curtain. I think we've been very open with Jody and have been trying to be transparent about how we're doing with those. So that was kind of a long answer. I think what we would do is we normally do come up with a pretty detailed list of goals in concert with the candidate, or in concert with the new town manager and others, and then we would just come back and talk about how we're doing. And so nobody's surprised. We're not keeping anything secret. We're just communicating as we go. So I think the new town manager will have a clear sense of how they're doing, what we're looking for, and we would certainly want that.
That's great.
And then we have a process in usually September or October where we do a performance review, and we have a form that we all follow. We do a performance review. We meet with you, and as Tom said, hopefully nothing that we say to you in that performance review is a surprise, because we've been communicating with you throughout the year. And then, we go from there. And as part of that performance review, it may be that after we do that, we set goals for the following year. So in connection with that, there may be either new, different, the same goals that we set for you moving forward.
I guess I would add that there's a lot of the soft skills that aren't on that piece of paper that we would also just kind of get a feel from in the community. And that's really about, you talked a lot about like high expectations. Everyone here in town has high expectations. They expect progress. They expect like not being stagnant, not status quo, and like you being part of that as a leader and the town manager of getting better and improving. We're all reasonable. Stuff happens. Stuff doesn't move forward, or, people are upset about things. But as long as we're all on the same page of progress moving forward, pushing a project forward, whatever is for the best of the community, then I think that's really a great, that's a good indicator for me.
I would just add, so, I mean, it's sort of the two processes that are different but related. So the goal setting is, as Tom mentioned, we're very clear, not on day one, but give you 30 days to get used to it. But
3 days.
But you probably seen when you were here before what Jody had. So there's 10 items, but there'll be things like, the balanced budget, the how we allocate funds in terms of capital, settling certain contracts if that's up that year, development of a new fire station, whatever that year's issues are. And they'll change. Some of them stay forever, some of them move. The review process itself has other questions that is sort of kind of soft, like how well do you work with other local agencies, with our state representative and senator, with the press, so they're not pure goals, but they're more soft, but really critical to the job. So we'll share those with you. But it's only 10 of them. It's not onerous, but it's you should see those up front if you're the candidate.
I think just keeping us informed. Jody's been really good about that, keeping us up to date on anything that's happening, whether it's a security issue, safety issue, what's happening in town. And she's very informed. She gets the information to us, so we're not surprised. And then she's very open about what the issues really are, so we can make a decision if it's required. So I think just being open with us, keep the information flowing, keep an open dialogue with us.
That's a very good point, because you mentioned, sometimes people call the select board and not the town manager. So when, our friends say, why is the road closed here? Why is, okay, well, if we know ahead of time there's been a fire, there's been a water main burst, we can look like we're smart. So we appreciate that.
I remember that, and I think about it now. Why did I want to know, as a selectman about that car crash? Because I'm not a police officer, but I remember back, people would call. People
Right.
called the selectman and say, hey, what happened with that car crash? Immediately.
Or it's even faster now with Facebook, right?
Yeah. I
was
The
gonna say
Westford
with
Moms
Facebook.
Connection.
My selectmen sometimes tell me before the police or fire chief will tell me, and I'll be like, I just found out 5 minutes ago there was a fire from one of my selectmen who found out on Facebook.
Right.
So, yeah.
I'm the first to know when a tree's down.
Okay. Okay. Yep. I love that. That's great.
Thank you very much for coming in this morning, and for all the time and the effort you put into this.
Thank you. This was great. Thank you for the questions, and thank you for your time.
Right.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Sorry, I'm just checking in case my dad is like.
What? We're gonna start again?
Folks, I'd like to introduce
Good news.
Eric Heidemann. I think you know Eric. He's been the assistant town manager here for over 6 years. He's worked previously in Framingham, Ashland, and he's a veteran of the U.S. Navy, and grew up in North Adams, Massachusetts. Eric? Oh, well-educated, by the way. Don't ask him. He's got undergraduate degree, 2 masters, and plenty of certificates. He's MCPPO certified. Qualifies as a purchasing agent in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Eric?
Thanks, Liz. Good morning. Thanks for being here and giving up another Saturday morning for us.
Happy to be here, thank you.
We usually start with introducing ourselves, but I think you know everybody here, at least on the board.
Yes, absolutely.
So let me start with a question that was asked before, but other folks here haven't heard your answer. So tell us something about yourself that we have not learned from reading your resume and the submissions that you have made to us in this process. And it can be, as I said previously, related to anything.
Okay, great, thank you. So I was born in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and raised in North Adams, as was previously mentioned. I'm the youngest of 3 boys. I joined the military at age 19, and returned to the Commonwealth after 5 years of honorable service in the Navy. My goal upon leaving the military was to pursue my graduate education. I obtained my master's degree in public administration at Framingham State University. I'm very much into music. You may not know that about me, but I've played guitar for over 20 years, and I like to sing. I've actually played at our holiday luncheon on numerous events, or numerous occasions, and even at the strategic planning retreat one year. So that's something that's very passionate to me, and my family loves music, so that's something near and dear to us. I have a very supportive wife who has her doctorate in psychology, and she works as a school psychologist at North Middlesex Regional School District. I have 2 wonderful daughters, Amelia and Colette, age 6 and 1, and they keep me pretty busy, let's just say that. When I was appointed as the annual assistant town manager, I actually had never even been to Westford before. I knew nothing about it. We moved from Millbury to Dunstable upon getting this job. I told my wife, I convinced her it was the right move for our family. She quit her job, we uprooted our children, and we came up this way, and we've been so happy ever since. I've learned to love everything about the Westford community, especially the many dedicated and highly skilled employees that we are fortunate to have here. I did not take this decision to apply lightly. I had countless conversations with my wife. I know this position requires a significant time commitment, and I'm ready to take on that challenge if the select board so choose me. I'm humbled by the amount of support that I've received from the many board and committee members, several of whom are here today. I'm so grateful to have this opportunity, and I'm so excited to really go through this interview process, so thank you.
Thanks, Eric. I think we learn a lot about people when we see them in moments of crisis, and learn a lot about ourselves when we go through moments of crisis. So I was wondering if you could pick something, and it could be from any chapter of your life. It could be from before, or military, or time in service here. Sometime when you found yourself in a crisis, what was it, and what'd you do, and what'd you learn?
Okay. I guess, in terms of working in a municipal government, and then comparing it to my municipal or my military career, certainly very different. There were a lot of crises while I was overseas, supporting Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. I had the opportunity to serve a very diverse group of individuals from different walks of life. We were in a war zone. It was very stressful day in and day out. I learned to overcome that and be confident. I learned so many great things from so many great people, and I feel like I wouldn't be who I am today without my military service. I think it really greatly changed my life, and I think that I bring a lot of different unique skills to the table from that experience.
Anything specific that occurs to you? So, fellow veteran, you've got another fellow veteran here, but is there anything that you draw down on and say, yeah, I walked into this thing, I was caught off guard, and I learned for the next one I had to be this way?
Sure. I guess I think of when I was a convoy commander back in Afghanistan, and it was a very stressful job, and we actually experienced attacks from IEDs regularly, and in fact, on one specific occasion, it was very detrimental. There was somebody severely injured in our convoy, and I needed to provide immediate response relief. That individual was flown out by helicopter, and it ultimately was saved. But it was an extremely stressful event that I don't forget, and I carry forward with me every night. Sometimes things like that keep you up at night, but certainly I try to remember my history and why the things were important to me and what it makes me how I am today. So I hope I answered your question.
That's great. Yeah, thanks, Eric.
Do the questions need to be the same?
No.
Okay. So there's a work trend called quiet quitting. Do you know what that is?
Yes.
Okay, well, I guess in case there are people who don't know, quiet quitting refers to doing the minimum requirements of one's job and putting in no more time or effort or enthusiasm than absolutely necessary. So how would you motivate town staff to prevent quiet quitting?
Okay. I think it's really a proactive approach. It starts from the top, setting the tone as the manager, being motivated, inspiring those to do their mission and goals for each of their departments. I feel confident that you could speak to anyone at this town hall that they would say, I'm extremely motivated, extremely friendly, and willing to roll up my sleeves and help anytime. In terms of monitoring for quiet quitting, I think through performance reviews is an important process that we can look at annually to establish goals and to reflect on what's been accomplished over the prior fiscal year. That's a process we've had in place here in town, at least for our department head level staff, that our town manager has implemented. And I do think that they do appreciate receiving that level of feedback and having that two-way conversation to know where there's areas for improvement.
I guess a quick follow-up to that is that you were saying, if we talk to any of the staff members, they're going to be like, I'm ready to work, I'm really motivated to be here. How would you motivate staff? How would you, what do you think is the town manager's role in creating that culture?
Thank you. I think it's really leading by example, showing up on time, staying late, doing extracurricular activities, participating in after-hours events to increase team building within the town. Being vocal, being somebody who's not afraid to speak up if they see something wrong within the organization. I'm totally comfortable filling that role and stepping up to that responsibility if called upon.
Okay.
Yeah, you've probably worked under several different managers and seen several different management styles in your career, both military and civilian. How would you go about setting a tone or an example for the staff, and then how would you deal with the select board on one hand, citizens on the other? What kind of tone would you set? What kind of example do you think you would set?
I guess, as I mentioned previously, and not to repeat myself, but it's really leading by example. working to ensure that our staff are aware of the vision for the organization, to communicate it regularly, to ensure that we are continuously reflecting on past decisions and issues that come before the town, and trying to always look to be more efficient and more effective. I think as a manager, it's really important to really reflect on one's actions to really ensure that you're doing the right thing. Obviously, I may not be the smartest guy always in the room, but I would say I'm the hardest working. And, I would strive to really put that work ethic I would really strive to show that work ethic to our employees so that they too can understand why I value what we do here in this town.
You had some overseas assignments you just alluded to as far as in Afghanistan and whatnot. How does that experience inform you as to how you interact with, say, the general population or with the town when it comes to our population getting more diverse? What did that experience in other countries, viewing other civilizations, how does that affect your view on that?
Okay. Thank you, Joe. I guess, diversity is really something that's key in the military. I mean, you commonly hear the term, it's the melting pot. It really is. I mean, coming from North Adams and joining the military was a major change in my life. I worked with individuals from around the country, and in fact, I didn't even realize that we actually have citizenship programs where individuals can earn citizenship to our country through military service. I have met so many great people from the Philippines who were serving in the United States military who wanted to just serve our country and become a United States citizen. I really learned the true value of diversity and the different ideas that each person brings to the table. On a personal level, I have a heritage of Puerto Rican heritage in my blood. My grandparents grew up in Puerto Rico. Unfortunately, I lost both of them at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. But they predominantly spoke Spanish as their first language in their home growing up. So, it's something that I really feel as though I've had a lot of exposure to. When I was in Africa for 6 months and at Comoros Island, which is a tiny island just north of Madagascar, we were with 15 individuals from the military in civilian clothes, and our charge there was a humanitarian effort. We were constructing a school for the local population. I was the third senior officer in charge of that deployment. I was in charge of the budget and negotiating supply contracts with local vendors. I didn't speak French, so I needed to hire a translator, but really we had a lot of experience living within the community. We weren't with our military, we weren't on a base, we really got to dive into the culture of everyone there and participate in their civic processes and get to understand everything. I think those are experiences that I'll probably never have the opportunity to do that ever again in my life, and something I'll never forget.
Thank you.
So you're unique amongst the three candidates that you are already here as a staff member, and the question I asked of our fire chief and police chief when they were applying for jobs is the same I'd ask you, which is you're going to go from being one of your peers to being the manager, and it's a difference in how you then are perceived and probably perceive others. So I guess how are you prepared to make that change in relationships with staff to become the one doing reviews as opposed to being the person that you have a lunch with?
Sure. So I think it all starts with me. It's setting the expectations clear. I would want to have one-on-one meetings with each of our department head meetings. Kind of understand what's going on within their departments and where they need my assistance. There may be individuals that may not get on my team right away, and I may need to have multiple meetings with them to provide positive reinforcement. It's certainly something that I think I've been campaigning for this job since I was hired in 2016. I've been working tirelessly to prepare myself for this. I've ensured to maintain professional relationships with each of our department heads and town staff. I do not hang out individually with town staff. I find that it's very important to keep a manager and employee separation, and I would continue to do that. At the same time, I think it's important for the manager to participate in outdoor events, whether it's going to dinner with a group of employees to just catch up and try to build our team to be a more cohesive unit. I would fully support that, but in terms of stepping up from the assistant to the town manager, I don't anticipate a problem. Westford is very fortunate to employ very highly skilled and knowledgeable department heads who are very professional, and I don't anticipate any issues.
This is somewhat of a follow-up to what Tom asked you earlier about crisis, but a little bit different. Throughout your career, I'm sure that things have not always gone perfectly for you, and just things that perhaps you were advocating for didn't come to pass. So if you could tell us about a mistake that you made in the past, and what that mistake was, and looking back, how would you handle it differently, and what did you learn from it?
I guess I think of something that happened not too long ago here, since it's fresh on my mind.
Okay.
So overseeing procurement for the town, as you're all aware, the charter has Jody as the chief procurement officer, but she does delegate that responsibility to me as the assistant. Procurement is definitely not everyone's favorite topic. Keeping everyone to ensure that they're in compliance with the various statutes by the Mass state law is very essential to ensure we do not have future issues. In one issue in particular, I had noticed that I saw a potential problem with a previous supplier service that had been purchased by one of our department heads. It was a late afternoon, and I thought, boy, I want to send them an email to let them know I need some additional information because I have some concern. I quickly sent that out, and I left for the day. My phone rang quickly thereafter, and the department head was calling me, and they were very upset. They felt as though I was targeting them and that I should have picked up the phone and called. And I completely agree. We had a wonderful conversation following that. I felt like, I needed to take time. That was something I should have looked back on and said, this employee may take this conversation very negatively. Next time, I know that I need to pick up the phone and have a one-on-one conversation, because oftentimes written word can be, confused for something that you had no intent of saying. So I think in terms of what I learned, I think as a manager, like I said earlier, it's continuously reflecting on your past actions, questioning if you did the right thing, or identifying ways in how you can improve the next time. I think that's something I apply to my everyday life, personal and professionally. I always strive to continuously improve.
Thank you.
I just want to acknowledge the sensitivity for some of these questions, because you're talking about your colleagues and relationships with people you work with every day, and so some of these may be just a little bit tricky. My question is about the relationship with schools, and you've got a number of school committee members, past and present, here today, very invested and involved, because it's really important who the town manager is to the schools. Maybe you could offer up your perspective, particularly in the budgeting process, of how the sort of schools in town were interacting several years ago, and if there's something that you've seen that's getting better, that's a trend that we should reinforce. Just maybe your opinion on things that you've seen that maybe didn't go so well, and I think some of those things are improving. Maybe if you have an opinion about what's gotten better and what we should continue to do.
Okay. I guess I've had the opportunity, I think I'm unique. I used to work in the school department. In my former position, I was the director of facilities in the town of Ashland. So that actually afforded me with the opportunity to learn about the school department and what makes it tick. What's important to the school department may be much different than what's important to the general government side of operations. I think bringing that experience to the table certainly helps. I think from what you mentioned several years ago to where we are today, I think communication is greatly increased. I envision, if offered the position, that Dr. Chu and I will have regular conversations to update each other on where we are financially and with both long and short-term needs. I think it's important that we, as leaders in this community, ensure that we have a very positive working relationship and that we're communicating as much as possible. That doesn't just stop at Dr. Chu. I think that extends to all of his school administration staff as well as the school committee. As somebody who's a leader in the community, I think it's important for me to have very positive working relationships, to be flexible, and to be adaptable to the problems that come before me.
Good, thanks.
What does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you?
I actually had a lot of time to think about this because I feel like I struggled a little bit on my first interview. So I'm glad you brought it back up, Anita.
You can count on me. Talk about DEI.
I guess when I think about diversity, each word is really unique to me, and they have a special meaning. We're not just talking about somebody's race or somebody's gender when we talk about diversity. We could be talking about their religious beliefs or their physical disabilities. When I think about equity, are we treating people the same way? Are we being consistent in how we make decisions? And lastly, in terms of inclusion, do people have a sense of belonging, both internally and external to the organization? I do feel as though I am a strong advocate for DEI, and I do think that my unique perspective, including my family history, my work history, enables me to have a clear perspective on approaching DEI initiatives for the town.
Okay. What have you personally done to advocate for DEI in the workplace?
Okay. Personally, I guess I'm a very inclusive manager. I don't think that a town manager can be effective all alone. It takes a team. And we are fortunate to have such a wonderful team here, which is one of the many reasons why I decided to put my name in for this position. Oftentimes we talk about collective bargaining, for example. Although I have served as the lead negotiator on 3 contracts, it wasn't just me at the table. It was an inclusive process. It was our director of human resources, our select board liaisons, our director of finance, who all come together. I firmly believe in having an inclusive process, having our department heads engaged at the table, and listening to their voices and taking that into consideration when moving forward on initiatives. Certainly, I think, as a manager, I need to apply situational leadership. There's not one size fits all when you're in this position. I think I need to adjust my leadership style to the situation at hand. By default, I would say I'm more of a participatory leader. I like to hear people's opinion. I like to have their input. But sometimes in this role, it won't be possible because things happen quickly. Every day's different. That's one of the things I love about the position. It's a very exciting job. Every day is different, and you just never know what you're going to walk into. And that's what I thrive on.
And just a quick follow-up. It's kind of a scenario, right? So if you learned that a member of the community contacted the DEI committee to report an issue where they felt like they were treated differently by a staff member because of their accent, how would you address that situation?
Well, as a town manager, I think it would be my job to take swift action. As a community that identifies that there are DEI initiatives, we need to support and embrace our community. As I mentioned in my first interview, a large portion of our population is Asian alone, with 23.1%. I think that it's important. I apologize to make you do this, but can you repeat that whole
Yeah, I know, it's
question?
kind of long. It's all right. No, it's fine.
I lost my place.
It's okay. No, you're fine.
But I'm
Don't
sorry.
worry, don't worry. Okay. So if you learned that a member of the community contacted the DEI committee, basically to report an issue, where they felt like they were treated differently by a staff member because of their accent, how would you address that situation?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. It's okay.
So as I mentioned, I would want to take swift action if this employee was a member of one of our 6 collective bargaining units. I would want to immediately notify their union representation that I'd like to have a hearing that might include potential discipline. I would notify our Director of Human Resources of this allegations against this employee, and I would begin to immediately conduct an internal investigation. I would notify our Select Board of these allegations so they are aware and let them know of what actions I'm taking to ensure that this does not happen again. Following the meeting with this individual, I would immediately let them know that that type of behavior is unacceptable as a Town of Westford employee. If I seen it happening in front of me, it is my duty as town manager to stop it, to tell them that there is no place for behavior like that here in the Town of Westford. I really think it's the town manager's duty to set the tone and hold people accountable. And when it comes to DEI, when there's issues that arise, they need to be addressed immediately. It's not something that can wait. And I would be very proactive in my approach to dealing with that.
Okay, thank you.
In some of your correspondence or in the application, you mentioned the need to assume the role of project management. What did you mean by that? How would you do it? And what kind of level of detail would you be working at?
So I guess when I think of projects coming up, in terms of with Jody vacating, there are so many different projects in the pipeline in our community that the manager needs to have a pulse on and understand where they are in the process. While some of these projects may be led by a department head, specifically maybe our DPW director, I think it's important that the town manager stay engaged, monitor these projects, ensure that they're coming in under budget and on time. Sorry, I almost forgot that. Just to name a few, we have our J.V. Fletcher Library project, which is coming in the works, our new center building that will be presented at town meeting and coming up, our Blanchard School roof replacement project, which is a 48% reimbursement from MSBA, which is great, and we have other initiatives such as our energy savings performance contract that we're exploring through Amoresco. I think as the next manager, it is essential that I'm involved to some degree with all of these projects. Working closely with our finance director and treasurer and collector to keep track of our debt fall-off schedule, to track the finances, to work with our permanent town building committee collaboratively to provide the administrative and technical assistance that they may need to complete all of these projects.
One follow-up, just on clean energy and sustainability, I noticed that you have an electric vehicle, but anyway, and you're plugged in out here. But what would you, if you look into the future, what would you think would be kind of a approach to moving forward on clean energy and sustainability? Could we have these immediate targets? What's the long range? How would you support that?
Thanks, John. I do have an electric car.
Yeah, I know.
I have two, actually. My wife has one, too. We actually love them. Energy efficiency and sustainability, it comes near and dear to me. It's something I'm passionate about. Being a former facilities director, that's something that you do every day. I think taking an incremental approach is definitely something the community needs to do. We have certainly set through our resolution at town meeting to be carbon neutral by 2050 is a very aggressive goal. And it's going to take time and resources. I've been able to achieve $879,000 in green community grants since my time here, which have been used towards a variety of energy efficiency projects in town, with the end goal of hopefully we're continuing to work towards that 2050 goal. Also, I must note that within the last year, we were able to secure grant funds to hire our first sustainability coordinator, which is something that was highly supported by the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee. I was able to obtain that grant through the Mass Community Compact Regionalization and Efficiency Program, and we're currently sharing that position 50-50 with the town of Carlisle. I'm happy to report that Sue Thomas, a former member of our Recycling Commission, has filled that role, and she's been doing an outstanding job hitting the ground running. Those are just some examples of things that I've done in terms of energy and efficiency, but we're also looking at an energy savings performance contract through Amoresco. We were able to leverage that with a $15,000 technical assistance grant to hire an owner's agent to help us explore the complexity of this type of project. That's something we're currently still working on behind the scenes right now, and the new town manager will be essential to move that forward.
Can I ask sorry, sorry, keep going. I just wanted to ask a follow-up to that.
You can, but let him finish
Yeah, sorry.
his answer, okay?
I thought you were.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. I guess energy efficiency comes natural to me. As I mentioned, personally, we take it very seriously. You know, I respect our environment. That's part of the reason why we decided to purchase electric vehicles, you know. Also, you know, leading by example, when we put these charging stations in that we were able to achieve through a grant as well, you know, I kind of thought, what a better way to inspire others to get electric vehicles than to get one myself. So you may see any day you're here at the town hall, I'm plugged in out there. But, you know, really, I'm just trying to get others here to see the benefit in doing so. I think if you spoke to anyone clean energy, you know, we're not looking for people to sell their internal combustion engines cars tomorrow, but rather take a pragmatic approach and do things incrementally. Perhaps when your car comes up for replacement, looking at an electric option. Educating our residents on different opportunities that are out there, whether it's federal tax credits or different incentives through Mass Save. I think we have a lot to offer and a long way to go in terms of energy efficiency, and I think that's one of my biggest strengths that I provide and come to the table with here.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you before. I thought you were winding. I guess my follow-up question is, you know, you use sort of like the royal we, right? Because it's all very collaborative. It's all a lot of teamwork. But I think it's important for us and the public to understand your individual contributions or your individual leadership in that kind of process. So like a lot of the things that you mentioned were things that the town is doing. But could you talk specifically about your role and how you've led something related to energy or something else?
Sure. So a lot of our energy efficiency projects that you'll see, I guess to name a few projects specifically, projects that I've spearheaded since I've been here. As we mentioned, the electric vehicle charging stations, I think is a big one. That was a combination of about $235,000 in grants that we were able to obtain through Mass DEP and National Grid incentives. That was something I decided to take on by myself. I kind of thought that, you know, electric vehicle charging infrastructure is the future. Our government is really pushing this, and I wanted us to take advantage of the grant opportunities while they're out there, because eventually they won't be. I think it's taking that proactive approach, identifying trends that are changing in the future, and really trying to make a thoughtful path to get to where we want to go. I guess another project that comes to mind is our streetlight LED retrofit project, which was almost nearly entirely funded through grants at about $409,000, which changed our streetlights in town across the board to LED fixtures. That had a huge impact across the board on our carbon emissions for the town. You know, that was something that I also did on my own. You know, town manager, Jody, you know, she did a really, she's let me kind of evolve as a manager in some degree on my own. While she was a very effective mentor for me in different ways, she did allow me to tackle different projects and initiatives on my own with little to no assistance. I think Jody valued my experience that I bring to the table with facilities and energy management, and at the time I was hired, we were actually just considering consolidating our facilities department. I do think that I've personally led a lot of great initiatives in terms of energy efficiency, but I don't think that really it's a one-person thing. I think with our addition of our new sustainability coordinator, our Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee, it's got to be a collaborative approach. And you know, I think that I set the tone for that, providing them with the tools and skills that they need, whether it be information on grants that are available or providing staffing resources to see that our program is successful.
So whoever becomes next town manager inherits, you know, the A team of direct reports. Yeah, as we noted in our materials, there's a need to think about planning for succession in some of our departments. And so I guess there's sort of two questions there. One is, what do you look for as we hire new staff to make sure we get the best? I mean, I know clearly you want to get the best. What do you look for specifically to make sure we get the best? And then secondly, aware of the irony of this question, but do you have any preference for promoting from within versus hiring from outside?
Scott, would you mind just repeating the first part?
So, as we get job openings through either retirements or departures, and some of them being department heads, some of them being people who are going to be hopefully growing someday to be that, what are you looking for in terms of characteristics, traits, skill sets in employees, make sure we get the best that we can get, and who want to stay here or grow?
Thank you. I guess I think I would take a similar approach that Jody took. We don't have that many vacancies that open. Our retention levels are pretty good, actually. People are happy here, which is great. Speaks highly of the management style that Jody has laid out for the last 15 years. I think in terms of identifying the qualities for our next future municipal employees, I think integrity is important. Knowing that somebody's doing the right thing when you're not looking. Customer service is something that I'm very, very, very much a supporter of, and I know Jody was as well. And I will say, I think that she probably created that in me, because when I got here, I didn't realize the importance of customer service quite as much, because when you're working in facilities, you're often behind the scenes. You're not working with people day in and day out. And coming to the town manager's office, helping our residents, our board and committee members, it's a whole different game. But I'm really glad that I had that time as a department head to have that experience, because I think it's important. I guess in terms of from promoting within to hiring outside, that's a tough answer. I think that there's a lot of benefit from hiring from within. I certainly think that was one of Jody's guiding principles that she passed on to me. She felt as though it built a lot of trust within the workforce. And we've promoted a lot of individuals just since I've been here into different roles, and they've actually been very successful. But you really have to take a pragmatic approach, because at the same time, we all know that we would love to diversify our workforce here in Westford. That's an issue that we need to begin to tackle incrementally. I think I would take a very logical approach, working collaboratively with DEI, the DEI committee, our Director of Human Resources, and I would try to keep an open mind as each position comes open, to revisit it, see if we need to make changes to the job description to see if it's meeting the needs of the town, and really weighing the merits of going outside versus hiring from within. I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all decision, and I honestly wouldn't want to commit to one way or the other.
I guess there's one follow-up, which is my own follow-up, not because you didn't answer it, but part of the development of an employee is training. And how do you feel we do now with our training? And it seems that there's two respects to that. One is the technical skills that you need for your job, which hopefully they've already kind of learned and they will add more to. But then sort of the management skills, if they want to move up to become department heads and perhaps town managers, there's a need to learn that management skills. So how do you feel we do about training, and could we improve that for our employees?
I guess when I think internal to the organization, there is room for improvement. We could explore further cross-training. We do anticipate several upcoming retirements of our very important department head level positions in the future. And I think it's important that we don't let that institutional knowledge go out the door. Identifying employees within the organization that have the skills, experience, and drive that want to take on higher levels of responsibility is something that the manager needs to do. I think having conversations with our employees, seeing what makes them tick, seeing, are they interested in pursuing a master's degree? Do they want to be a department head someday? I enjoy having conversations with all of our town employees here, especially, right here at the town hall. I think if you ask anybody who's here, I'm a very friendly and approachable person. I think for many, many years, I used to eat lunch with our late Joan Roy downstairs in the kitchen. And, we learned so much about each other and we shared so many good stories. But I think as a manager, really, you need to be out there talking to the people, inspiring them, providing them with the tools and skills they need.
Can you describe a situation that required you to resolve a conflict between either individuals, employees, department heads? How did you handle that conflict, and how was it resolved?
Okay. Sorry, I had to think for a minute.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I guess when you think about conflict, some conflict is good. Sometimes when you're having a conversation or when we diversify work groups, conflict occurs. People have differing opinions on how things get done, but really it's taking all of that information under advisement and making a decision how to proceed forward. I can honestly say Jody and I don't agree on everything, and certainly we have different approaches to how we would handle issues. While I certainly respect Jody, and I think that she's done an excellent job as our town manager for the last 15 years, I'm not Jody. I have my own leadership style. I have my own approach. And, you know, I think that I have shown the residents of the community, as well as our town staff, that I am somebody who can take on this level of responsibility, who can be a leader in the community, who can listen, be an effective listener, and really guide us into the future.
So let me ask you a follow-up question. With respect to the select board, how would you, what happens, or how would you handle when your opinion about a particular issue differs from the select board's opinion, and how would you handle that, and what would you do?
Okay. I guess it comes down to a level of professionalism. I think as the town manager, working at the pleasure of the board, it's to really try to remain neutral. I really see myself as the researcher, the implementer, somebody who's working to provide the select board with different options for issues that come before the town, and providing a clear and concise recommendation when necessary. Certainly so. There's been plenty of times that I've seen the board disagree with Jody while I've been here. And, you know, you just keep going forward as a manager. You may not always agree with your board, but you respect their decisions. You move forward and you implement their policies. You know, I'm fully supportive of that. And, you know, if I disagreed, I may request that the chair allow me to respectfully state my opinion. But at the end of the day, if the board decided something that disagreed with what I was putting forward, I would accept that and move forward.
This is sort of an economic development question, in that if you look at what's going on in Westford in terms of vacancy rates, the way property is being used, some of the new multifamily stuff that will come up as part of the new transportation-related stuff, what are some of the things, if you look sort of in the 3 to 5 year time frame, that are challenges you see on Westford's horizon, things you think we should be thinking about now and jumping ahead of?
Sure. So one thing that's looming out there is our multifamily zoning requirement for the MBTA communities. You know, that's supposed to be a bylaw or an ordinance in place by the end of calendar year 2024. You know, in talking with our Director of Land Use Management, this could be a very positive change for our community. While some communities are not quite so happy about this change, we're trying to take an optimistic approach to it. We do think that by effectively rolling out a new bylaw for multifamily housing, we can allow potentially allow multiple principal uses on a parcel. We can address our ongoing housing crisis, which is considerable. We can strengthen our non-residential tax base, potentially locating housing perhaps close to where businesses might be struggling. We still have businesses that are struggling to recover from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think trying to reach out and have a level of communication with them. Our Economic Development Committee is looking for a part-time economic development coordinator. I think that may be something that could help to have a conduit or communication line with our businesses to try to understand what their needs are, and so we can be proactive rather than reactive. Right now, our Director of Land Use, Jeff Morissette, assumes a lot of those duties, but That's among a lot of variety of other things that he's responsible for. I know this request is becoming before the select board next Tuesday, and I'm not sure what the board will decide, but certainly a position of that nature may help to really strengthen our communications with the businesses in town. Also, you know, if for non-compliance in terms of the MBTA community's multifamily legislation, if we don't comply, we run the risk of losing funding for 3 major sources. One of them impacts our local housing authorities. So I think we're trying to take a more pragmatic approach in trying to be optimistic in terms of this mandate that's coming down from the state. I think this is just one example of how we can try to rethink about our relationship with local businesses and how the town can support them as much as possible.
Thanks.
Could you talk about how you've been involved in our town achieving its current bond rating? I mean, that's a really big thing for us, obviously, just kind of helping us understand your individual actions towards that.
Okay. I'm trying to think here. I guess I haven't directly been involved with the bond rating process. You know, typically it involves our finance team. The town manager may be involved. Certainly I would want to be if I was appointed as the next town manager. But I think it really, a lot of the select board policies that are in place today, the budget policy direction, our policy on reserves, these are the things that help guide the town towards having a positive bond rating, funding our OPEB liability. These are all things that have to be considered. And, you know, our town has done a really effective job at planning our finances. We have solid reserves. We're funding OPEB. We're funding our Middlesex retirement assessment. You know, we're being proactive. We have a debt fall-off schedule that goes many, many years into the future. We try to plan ahead, but I guess in terms of direct participation in the bond rating process, to circle back to your question, you know, I haven't had that opportunity yet, but I welcome it. I'm looking forward to getting more involved, and honestly, throughout this process, I think I've got more and more educated on all of our departments because I really felt like I needed to do that to prepare myself for this process.
Okay. But you're familiar with the bond rating process and like whatever in general? Okay.
Absolutely.
You mentioned that your leadership style and approach are different. How would you characterize your leadership style?
Thanks, John. I guess, you know, not to repeat myself, but I do see myself as more a participatory style. I do enjoy having different opinions at the table. As I mentioned, you know, I may not always be the smartest guy in the room, and I'm willing to admit that. I think that we have some of the brightest, knowledgeable department heads here that I've ever seen. I've worked in 2 other communities, and by far, this is a wonderful community to work for. And I honestly feel very privileged to even be your assistant, let alone have the opportunity to be your town manager. I guess.
Well,
Part you were thinking,
do you
George?
anticipate having a very transparent leadership role as far as what's going on? Informative?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that it's important that as the next manager to be extremely transparent, both internally and external to the organization, sharing information with our employees, having them part of the decision-making process. I think that helps them to have trust in administration. When it comes to our community, I think being out there in the community, being vocal, attending different cultural events, being somebody that our residents aren't afraid to reach out to when they have a problem. I'm happy to be that person. In fact, you know, over the last week, I've thought of different ways in how I could reach out to our community. And, you know, we have a lot of faith-based organizations in town. We also have a lot of different career opportunities, agencies that represent minority groups close by, right in Lowell. I think, you know, one thing I talked about with our Director of Human Resources was I would be totally open to committing to submit all of our job postings to these groups to try to diversify our candidate pool from the future. I think that that's very important and something that I'm willing to take on as the next town manager.
So we've got a pretty small town staff compared to other towns our size, and we do that because we've got a lot of committees that are volunteer citizens committees. that become force multipliers for our staff, to coin a military term that my colleagues know better than I do. But if you look at the town manager's newsletter every month now, there's a list of committees openings that get longer and longer. So what do you think we can do, we collectively, but as the leader on the town side, to improve the participation, I guess, of our residents in town government on these committees specifically?
I think it'll be on me as the town manager to get out into the community, to meet our residents, to build positive relationships. I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to go to our faith-based organizations. I'm willing to go to our cultural events. Bring my family. My wife would love to come. I think that it's important for me to get out there, to educate people about different opportunities in town, whether it be simply handing out information on different vacancies on our 63-plus boards and committees. Certainly trying to drive up a level of trust with town hall and our residents is important to me. And I do think that it's very important for me to be successful. In order for me to be successful is to be very active and visual in the community. I need to be out participating in events, similar to what I've done in the past, but even increased more than that. Participating in our parades, in our different tree lighting events, going to the PCA to attend in different, to participate in different events that might be held in the community. I think as the manager, really, it's up to me to set the tone, and being willing to roll up my sleeves and get out there, maybe outside of working hours on the weekends. I'm willing to do that, and I'm actually eager to get started.
That leads to one of the questions, but I'll kind of combine with this one because of time. But getting involved in the community with all those things is wonderful, and you've got committee meetings at night, you've got work during the day, you've got phone calls constantly. So you could, as town manager, work 24/7. How do you set boundaries and set priorities as to what you're going to do to keep your home life intact, even as you have a very active work life?
Okay. I've actually given that a lot of thought. I know that it's a significant time commitment. Jody and I've been right next to her the last 6.5 years. A lot of times I'm her person she runs things by when she's having a tough day. I feel like I've been involved in a lot of the different things that have happened because Jody's kept me apprised on things. And, I hope that if given the opportunity, I have the same relationship with my assistant. I think trying to identify a good work-life balance is good, but talking about my issues. As I mentioned earlier, my wife has a doctorate in psychology, and honestly, as much as I joke, we have a lot of great conversations, and it really helps me to decompress from issues at work that I might bring home. Sometimes it's difficult to unplug, but really, I honestly just embrace the position. It's difficult, but I thrive on challenging environment. I like to be challenged every day. I like an exciting job with lots of changes. That's something that I've grown to love.
Thanks.
Last question. If you're selected as town manager, you're following in the footsteps of Jody, who, as you well know, is highly respected and readily accessible, well-liked by everybody here. So as a result, you can probably expect that, at least in the beginning, you're going to face comparison to her from staff, from residents, from people who've interacted with her. How will you go about handling that, and what will you do to establish your own management and leadership presence?
That was something I definitely thought of before I submitted my name for this position. Actually, the joke around town hall was that whoever went after Jody was going to fail. So, obviously, I don't think that's accurate. I actually feel it motivates me, knowing that I need to live up to my predecessor. Jody did a great job at running this community. Obviously, she had a great select board that supported her. But certainly, I think it's important to just not let that impact you, to let it motivate you to always continuously do better. For me personally, I have a lot of drive. That's probably one of the biggest things I have, is a lot of drive. And I don't let things like that impact me. If anything, it just motivates me to work harder. So I don't see that being a problem for me at any point in my career, because I'm very confident in myself, and I feel as though I can do this position. I would not have even submitted my name if I didn't think that I could do an outstanding job for this community.
Do you have any questions for us, Eric?
I actually prepared a short little statement, if I could.
Sure.
Okay. So, I want to thank the Select Board and, most importantly, our entire Westford community for this amazing opportunity. I've greatly enjoyed being the Assistant Town Manager for the last 6.5 years. I've had the privilege of meeting, working alongside so many dedicated board and committee members, town staff, and residents on a variety of issues. I've worked tirelessly to prepare myself academically, professionally, and mentally in hopes that someday I'd be called upon by the Select Board to take on this challenge. I strongly believe that my diverse work history, including 5 years of active duty military service, 5 years plus serving as a municipal department head, and 6.5 years serving alongside our current town manager uniquely prepares me to be successful as Westford's next town manager. And with that, I have one question for you.
Sure, absolutely.
In terms of the Select Board, what do you see as the priorities, the top 3 priorities for the town manager in the first 6 months?
I can give one to start.
Okay.
Maybe we can all take
Yeah.
one, but I don't know if this is advice or a goal, but when you're taking over as complicated and as successful a team as the Westford team, I think it's important to kind of stop and listen. So the first thing I'd want to see is that there was sort of a thoughtful first period from the new town manager where they were listening, almost imagining what it would be like if you were coming in from the outside and listening to everything for the first time. So I think a steady transition that keeps this great team productive and doing well, that starts off with thoughtful listening, I think would be at least one of the 3 I would pick.
Go ahead, Anna.
I was gonna say, I can go if you're still thinking. Okay. I feel like there's also this balance of unifying the staff. Obviously, a lot of people are nervous about this transition. You don't have changing town managers very often, and just kind of bringing that stability to the staff and just letting them know that we're going to keep moving forward. Everything's going to be okay. And I think that a lot of that comes with strong leadership. So the soft skills of building that culture in the workplace is really important. So in addition to operations and moving things, whatever projects are moving forward, it's the management piece, it's the vision, it's the leadership that people can trust in the town manager.
I think following up on that, what I'm thinking is, I think an acknowledgement to your staff and to the staff and department heads of Westford that this is a change, that change is difficult, that it brings challenges, that you're aware of that, or whoever is the town manager is aware of that, and acknowledging that right up front, so that it opens hopefully lines of communication, and starts to set a tone that you're aware of how your staff is feeling, and what you need to do is you establish your own leadership to meet those concerns and of your staff.
And I'm number 4, I understand this, I have 3, but
That's okay. That's okay. We never just,
That's why I had to get in really quick.
I'm a forecaster, so we always get numbers wrong anyway.
I wouldn't admit that so readily.
Thinking about the fact that we have a new town manager coming online and, however fast we can turn someone around mechanically with contracts and so forth. December, we're already in, and maybe it's January, and town meeting is March. So, from a pragmatic standpoint, yes, we want by all means, we want to have the understanding of the change and the communication with staff. That's critically important, but also it's very important to get that quick victory, right? That town meeting does run well, that the budget is tight, that other articles are well prepared, well presented. So, the challenge is, to have the change occurring in a tight time frame, and yet this really hard date to hit that has to go well, because it's our annual town meeting. It's our one shot for the year to make sure it goes right. So, I guess my observation, don't lose sight of the fact that there is this, line in the sand we have to hit in March to have success for the whole town, plus the manager.
And last but not least.
Balanced budget.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I know that was probably not an easy question.
Thanks so much, Eric. Thanks for coming in this morning.
I can't thank you enough. Thank you
Thanks,
so
Eric.
much.
Okay, we're going to take this again before our last.
Yeah.
Your final candidate is Kristen Lass. Kristen is currently the Assistant Town Manager in Shrewsbury, population of about 38,000 people. Kristen has both private and public sector experience, been in Shrewsbury since 2010. She became the Assistant TM in 2015. Kristen. Have a seat.
Good afternoon.
Good.
Hi, Kristen.
Kristen has a master's degree and a bachelor's degree. She's also taught classes at Clark University.
Great, welcome.
Welcome, and yes, just about good afternoon. Anyway, Kristen, I know you've met Anita and I, but we'll just the rest of the board members will introduce themselves to you.
John Cunningham.
You.
Scott Hazelton?
Andrea Parana-Sweet.
Tom Clay?
Anita Tonakringwin.
Thank you so much for having me back. I'm very excited to be before you.
Great. And thank you for giving up yet another Saturday morning. Kristen, you were asked this question previously, but I thought you would share it with my fellow board members and the public who are watching today. Tell us something about yourself that we do not know based on your resume and the submissions that you made to us in your application that you think we'd all be interested to know about you.
Sure. Again, thank you so much. My name is Kristen Lass. I'm currently the Assistant Town Manager with the town of Shrewsbury, as was introduced. I currently live in the town of Boylston with my husband and two small elementary-aged children. What you may not know is I actually grew up in Groton, next town over, and have spent throughout my lifetime quite a bit of time in Westford, whether it's ski racing at Neshoba Valley, or at Kimball's, where most people come, golfing at Nabnasset Country Club, and also in my early professional career, I worked for a firm named Beals & Thomas, and we actually worked a lot at the East Boston camps on those land planning exercises with Morgan Memorial Goodwill. So I did not mention that in my last interview, but wanted to bring that to the table today, as well as just another sneak peek of my interest in Westford and my experience here in the past.
Very nice to meet you. I was very interested to read about Shrewsbury's practice of having operational overrides. And I'm wondering if you could just share what some of the challenges were, if there were any, of getting the town on board with that kind of philosophy, and any kind of pluses and minuses to that approach that you see.
Sure. Very similar to Westford, Shrewsbury has an excellent school system, an excellent town-managed government, but there's always a challenge when you can only raise the tax appropriation by 2.5% per year, and costs are going up more than that, as well as you always want to do better and have more services or more opportunities. So the town of Shrewsbury in 2014 passed its first operational override, and that was a smaller one, partially for schools and partially for the town. And then most recently, we passed the largest override in state history, $9.5 million. And that was a cooperation between the select board, the finance committee, and the school committee, working for actually a year leading up to that, to develop a framework of how they would move forward to use the funds that the override was going to bring in order to specifically help the school system and the town. So it didn't happen overnight. And what the town of Shrewsbury did was worked very closely with the town of Arlington. They had been successful in the past with their override framework, in which they would bring in a certain amount of money over a course of 2 or 3 years, then put that into an override stabilization fund so there wouldn't be spikes and an ask very shortly. And then there would be an expectation of the town that we would be going back to ask for additional overrides in the future to keep pace if the residents so chose to want to have those services in place. So again, I can't stress enough how much of a collaboration it was with town and school. There's actually a document that was prepared that we are sticking to in our budget preparations when we did budget for fiscal 2021, fiscal 21, 22, 23, and now into 24.
What was the biggest hurdle to get over to get it done?
I think it was getting the message out to all of the residents of what this meant and how it would impact them. I think one thing that we were able to do was put in place some additional tax implementation for elderly or disadvantaged through the assessor's office and through town meeting. So there could be some abatements for people who could not pay that extra tax. We were actually also going through this override portion when we were going through a CPA ask as well. The town of Shrewsbury just adopted CPA in 2020. So it was actually a very difficult year to ask for both things, and both passed at town meeting and both passed at the ballot. But I think it was the approach that the school committee took, that the select board took, and that the town staff took to actually educate the public of what these funds would be going towards and how they would enhance the population and the services within the town.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, go ahead.
So is Shrewsbury a single tax rate or a double tax rate?
It's a single tax rate.
Could you talk a little bit about like your specific role in that whole situation? Because I know, like, you know, you said it was a lot of teamwork, a lot of collaboration, but what was your role there in that process?
The town manager led the effort. I was there in support in helping to prepare the presentations that went before the select board meetings, so kind of the background information. I really led the information collection when we talked about how our economic tax base is going to help this, how many housing units we have in town. I really helped more with the background data in which the town manager and the select board and the school committee and our finance team worked more towards the numbers and the projections.
Okay, thanks. So I have a question about, in this job, you'll receive a lot of direct criticisms from the community or members of the community about controversial issues. Could you tell us about a time you've received public criticism and how you handled it?
Sure. I think that's the nature of the job. Fortunately or unfortunately, we are trained to be professional and cordial with everyone and understand where try to understand where people are coming from. I think a particular criticism that I am faced with often in Shrewsbury is hearing from people that we have too many housing units or that too many housing units are being built, and why am I allowing that? And it's really, I think I said in my first interview, which you two heard, but for the others, it's really about getting those people who are criticizing, if you can, at a one-on-one state, inviting them into a meeting or having them on a phone call and really understanding what are their concerns and why are they concerned. Having that open mind and open thought process, and asking them if there's anything that they can do to actually help me educate on some of the subject items that they might feel strongly about or feel that I don't see all the way through. So those are some of the reasons or some of the ways that I might face someone with criticism. I think in the name of social media today, not commenting back and reaching out on that one-on-one basis. If there's specific people that you can go and liaison through that they have a better relationship, perhaps using those connections as well.
How do you not take things personally?
I think it's practice and over time. I tend to not take things too personally. I know that the town of Westford is a business. Yes, there are times where I can go and speak to colleagues or other professionals. I'm feeling this way. I think that I'm doing it this right way. What are your thoughts? Bouncing things off of each other. But I think it's important that we're all humans, that we all have feelings, obviously. But in the end of the day, it's doing what's best for the town.
In your, some of the correspondence or some of your applications, you talked about personal expectations for a high-performing local government operation. Could you elaborate on what your personal expectations are?
Absolutely. I have very high expectations for myself, first and foremost, to be professional, to be have highest integrity, to have honesty, professionalism. My expectations for my staff are the same. I grew up with a family of small business owners, so if they didn't work professionally or do a good job, they were not going to be successful in their business. I also have family members who are a lot of teachers and educators and the same type of background. So in my family and my upbringing, I've always been held to the highest professional standards and in my professional life as well. And I think that's a show of a good leader as well. You lead the best you can, the highest standards you can, and that brings out the best in your employees. And like I said before, running a town is similar to running a business, right? You want the town to be successful, you want your employees to be successful, and you want your employees to be very happy with what they're doing. So I'm happy to expand upon that if you have any other questions.
Can I follow up?
Sure.
I want to follow up on your last statement, which is you want your employees to be happy. As a town manager, what would you do to ensure or help or encourage your employees to be happy?
Sure. I think it's getting to know them first, obviously, and understanding what motivates them. Some employees are motivated by praise. Some employees are motivated by giving them special projects. Some employees are motivated by time off. Some employees are motivated by money. Really understanding what motivates your employees, understanding why they want to work for the town, and making that personal and special connection. And perhaps I don't necessarily make that connection at all levels, but going through the department heads on the other levels of employees to understand those as well. But I think you'll have employees sometimes who will never be happy at work, but you want to have the morale of the town hall and the town of Westford employees always being at the highest it possibly can. And it's making those personal connections. It's, I was reading on the refrigerator downstairs in the waiting room, there's going to be a door decorating contest. That brings up, excitement in town. What are other events that your employees look forward to on a yearly basis that give them value and merit for working for the town, and finding those out specifically.
Go ahead.
And you're the assistant town manager for, if I read it right, community development and human resources, or
Health and Human
sources?
Services.
Right.
Yeah.
If you were selected for town manager, how would you embrace the public sector or public safety, public works? How would you go about getting up to speed on what they do? Or really, what is your current understanding of their jobs? Do you interact with them in your current job?
Yes.
And what will your expectations be as far as coming up to speed on our public safety and public works?
Sure. So throughout my career with the town of Shrewsbury, I've worked across all departments. Specifically in my role today, I oversee and am the department head for the community development departments, which is building, planning and economic development, and health and human services, which is council on aging, veteran services, health, recreation, and library. I interface day to day with all the other departments as well. Specifically right now, I'm working with the police department as we build a brand new police station, so I understand the ins and outs of their needs operationally and professionally. I interact with the police chief on a daily basis on certain types of investigations that he might need, speed studies that they're doing for the town, operations that they're running. I work very, very closely with the Department of Public Works because economic development and other development within the town does not occur without running water, sewer operations, roadway operations, and conservation in that sense. I actually was tied a little bit closer to DPW before the town manager changed the roles for specifically me to oversee the departments I see now. In terms of fire services, I interface with them very, very carefully through all of the permitting that they do, all of the safety training that they do, where they're out on the streets and whatnot. And then the financial departments obviously interface with them daily in terms of the budgets for the year in total, but also how our budgets are turning out, where we're seeing shortfalls, how people are interacting with the assessor's office, going in to ask for either abatements or understanding their property record cards. So I think I have a very good understanding of all town departments. Specifically right now, the town manager has me focusing on those two levels.
We have an outstanding staff that you're going to inherit if you're selected for the job.
Amazing.
Now, as you walk through that door, what kind of tone or atmosphere are you going to create in dealing with the staff and dealing with the citizens and dealing with the select board? Just kind of, because the tone and how you act and that sort of thing is kind of important. I've witnessed that before, you know, new guy coming in or a new gal coming in, you know, what's going to happen?
Sure.
So how would you approach that? What kind of tone would you set for the organization?
Well, I would set a collaborative tone. Your employees know a lot more than what I know right now about the town of Westford in terms of the day-to-day and the culture and the history. I would bring my leadership style and my leadership skills of collaboration, of innovation, of integrity to the table. But I would not move forward with any types of changes without going through a very full assessment of understanding all of the wonderful things that are being done today, and then understanding what things could be done better in the future.
If I could skip back maybe to what I call budget philosophy. So
Sure.
Westford historically is a conservative town fiscally. We did pass an override not long ago for teacher raises because they were underpaid relative to market basket. The town did support that. But in general, operational overrides aren't how we tend to do things. And
Sure.
it creates a budget philosophy, which is where can I find something to cut? We just did a health insurance assessment and changed the way of doing things to save $1 million. So when you run things a certain way, you make certain budget decisions and look for savings that don't hurt any services. And you make hard choices on things that maybe you would want and then say, well, we can't make that work in this budget set. If you have a pre-programmed set of operational overrides in the future, you make different kinds of decisions. So I guess do you have a bias towards one or the other? What's your sort of philosophy on how a town should budget?
Sure. So my experience in Shrewsbury is not really with the overrides. That's more recent. My experience in Shrewsbury is those cuts that have had to occur over the course of time and making those really hard choices. So obviously my philosophy is you need to have a balanced budget. That is not an option not to. It's working very closely with the select board, with the school committee, with the superintendent and other town departments that you're all equal. You all deserve a portion of the budget to fill the needs of the residents and the businesses for the town of Westford. So if an override were to be explored, that would be at the jurisdiction of the select board and the school committee. It could be a suggestion, and if I were to have a budget philosophy, it would be to have multiple suggestions to bring to the table in order for you to select and choose what you think is best for the outcome of the community at that time.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Throughout your career, I'm sure not everything has gone as you would like. Can you describe for us or give us an example of a mistake that you have made in your career? And looking back, how you would have handled it differently, and what did you learn from the experience, and how did you grow?
Sure. So we're not humans if we don't make mistakes, right? So there's certainly a lot that have been made in the past. And the one thing about being in municipal government is sometimes the mistakes are in public, and you must go through that process very carefully of how you come forward. I think one of the mistakes that I have seen that I had made in the past is recommending an employee to go to a specific position and then that employee not working out and having to find a path forward for that employee to exit the organization. And I think I could have done a better job with vetting that employee before we brought them on board with some additional vetting through having them write more essays for me to review, having me have more examples of their work, having some more conversations. And some of the work that was done by that employee over the time that they were with us caused me to have to do some additional work, have to do a little bit of damage control that I wish that I had made a decision differently in the past. So I do approach interviews and selection of candidates a little bit differently after that experience.
Thanks.
One of the most important and sometimes fraught relationships is between town and schools. So I'm interested to know if you've seen what kind of problems you can come up that you've seen in the past, and what kind of practices or solutions you've seen work.
Related to town and school.
Town and school relationship around the budget process, but also,
sure.
also just generally.
Sure. Well, I think that it's important to have a good working relationship with the school superintendent, their staff, and the school committee, and to understand where they're coming from. Usually the loudest voice is from the parents, that they want their children to have the best education possible, which is absolutely necessary and shouldn't be negotiable. What I would see is having those good conversations and relationships up front, understanding why there might be some strifes. You know, there's obviously operational needs, but there's also building needs. So how a town also goes about keeping up their school buildings and operating those would be an area where I'd want to make sure that I'm close to understanding. I know you're going through that assessment right now with all of your school buildings to understand how they're operating, how they're running, when you might need to do more improvements moving forward with them. I'm lucky to have the school superintendent in our building, and I actually see him on a weekly, if not daily basis, and have built a good relationship with them. I know your school superintendent is right down the hill, so that would be a good access point to understand on a daily basis and just have those conversations up front.
Good, thank you, and I should acknowledge our fellow elected officials. You've got a bunch of school committee members, past and present, in the audience there.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Thanks.
What does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you?
Sure. It means something different to everyone, I think. Diversity, equity, inclusion to me means understanding myself first, of where I have come from and how I have been raised and how I operate within my family and my unit, my family unit per se, and then understanding that other people don't see things perhaps the way I see things in terms of culture, in terms of upbringing, in terms of belonging. So I did say this in my first interview, so it might be a little bit of a repeat for both of you, that I'm learning on a daily basis still what diversity, equity, inclusion means, but trying every day to learn more about what other people might be feeling or thinking in my presence or the presence of a town, and learning tools and tactics to help people feel more comfortable or more included in an area or a way, so they don't feel alienated, and that they can bring their ideas and beliefs to the table and feel heard and contribute within a community.
And it's okay to repeat yourself because it is going to be new for a lot of people here. And so could you tell me about a time where you personally advocated for a DEI issue within the workplace?
Yes, absolutely. As I stated before, we're currently building a police station, and we got through the architectural review of the police station. We actually got through permitting and started building the police station. And myself and the human resources director sat down and said, we have men's rooms and women's rooms within the police station. We don't have any family restrooms. We don't have any non-gendered restrooms. We don't have any non-gendered locker rooms. And I work tirelessly with our architect and with our building committee, and we actually changed the makeup of the areas of the restrooms within the building. And we are moving forward with that today to make sure that both officers who are using the police station for their place of employment and people coming to the building have an area that they would feel comfortable in using when they enter that public building.
I have one more question.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of like a scenario.
Sure.
Right? So if you learned that a member of the community contacted the DEI committee that we have in town to report an issue where they felt like they were treated differently by a staff member because of their accent, how would you address that situation?
Could you just repeat that one more time?
Yeah,
I want to
that's
make sure I 100%
Yeah,
understand.
it's
the question.
500 words long. It's okay. If you learned that a member of the community contacted the DEI committee to report an issue where they felt like they've been treated differently by a member of the staff because of their accent, how would you address that issue?
Sure. Not being in the organization, I would first, coming in, want to understand what training the staff has had related to DEI and specifically related to perhaps people who do not speak English as their first language. I would want to get as much information as possible without being too intrusive from that DEI committee person of how the person felt, what was perceived, what department they were at, what type of business that they were doing. And if possible, I would perhaps reach out to that individual that felt slighted or not included to see what we could do, or find that staff person who could do that as well. And then if our staff person did treat that person unfairly or informally, certainly move forward with some sort of training first and working with human resources on the best course forward to deal with that.
Thanks.
May I ask
Yes.
a little follow-up? So during the time of Black Lives Matter, we had a lot of community members come forward, particularly students, and share stories about them not being seen, them having experiences of racism in Westford. And so I think in general learned that there are people out there. If you went to ask town staff, they'd say, we haven't gotten a call about that, we haven't seen that ourselves.
Right.
So, town staff is acting in excellent good faith, but how do we make sure we're doing a better job reaching out and listening, actively listening and seeing people who I think don't feel heard today?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a great example that I would transfer to the town of Westford. I lead the Human Services Leadership Team for the town of Shrewsbury, as I might have said before, and we actually had one of our leadership team meetings this past week. And on that call was myself, a member of the school department, she deals with their social needs, a member of the Council on Aging, and a member of the health department. And there were conversations that students did not feel comfortable in some of their classes. And it's really going out into the field and using those resources that you have. So it might not be a town staff person, it might be a social worker or a community leader at a church or another organization that would be feeding us more information related to that. We can't be all ears on everything at all points in time, but it's really making those connections to the community groups to make sure that we are in line and understanding what they're doing and what they're hearing on the ground, to make sure we're educating our staff to do the best they can moving forward. So I think it's a lot of more collaboration with other community groups that might be out there and having those conversations, or the social worker at the school bringing those items back to us.
Thank you.
One of the most important roles in my mind for the town manager is the development of collective bargaining agreements.
Sure.
And you cite some experience doing that. Could you elaborate on your role in those collective bargaining negotiations?
Absolutely. When I started as the assistant town manager for the town of Shrewsbury in 2015, I was also the de facto human resources coordinator, I guess you could say. The town of Shrewsbury did not have a human resources director until 2018. After 2018, my role evolved a little bit after that. My experience with collective bargaining is sitting at the table with the town manager, with the bargaining unit president, and the rep, understanding what their needs or requirements are, understanding from the town manager and the finance departments where we could go in terms of financial and also understanding from those department heads what they were looking for in terms of management rights. The town of Shrewsbury has 6 bargaining units. We don't have any clerical, which I understand Westford has clerical and also has middle management, so that would be different for me. I was not the lead negotiator, but I was at the table with the town manager, understanding all of the aspects at that time.
Okay, one more thing. Sure. You cite working with consolidations and regionalization
Yes.
of different departments, health department maybe with neighboring towns. Could you, how would you approach that for Westford? Because there seem to be some competing interests. You know, there's one consolidation with this town, and there's something else with the other town. Could you kind of elaborate on your experience doing that, and the value of it?
Absolutely. Since I started with the town of Shrewsbury in 2010, I was on a working group to develop the creation of the Central Mass Regional Public Health Alliance, which Shrewsbury receives their public health services from the city of Worcester and 4 other communities. I am the chairperson of that organization now, so I started in the planning realm to understand how we would build that organization, and now sit on that board to make sure that we are allocating proper funds from the town of Shrewsbury into that regionalization effort, and the city of Worcester dispatches their specialists throughout those 4 communities to serve public health needs. Actually, one of your health employees now came from our alliance, and we're very happy with her services and glad she's succeeding in the town of Westford right now. And we see that as a great benefit. Worcester is able to provide health services on all levels: environmental health, chief community health, and on-the-ground environmental inspections and services. And so we've seen towns come in and out of that alliance. We've had towns leave and we've had towns join. And at each point in time, we need to assess what benefits that brings to the alliance and what detriments it might bring, how that affects the budget and how it affects the operation. So I've seen that for that specific topic. I'm also on the chair of the Central Mass Veterans Services Board, where we have 4 towns that share one veterans officer. And that officer serves all of the veterans and also interfaces with us. And we see that as a huge benefit as well, because they understand the needs of that community. And again, we have to understand what he needs in terms of staff, what our budget is, and how that operates throughout the course of the time. We have not seen ins and outs of communities coming. It's been 4 towns since I've been involved for 6 years. But I think that it's okay for some towns to join certain regional services for one specific topic, and then others to join for another. Towns have very different needs when it comes to those specific topics.
So would that be something you would be interested in if you were to become town manager?
Absolutely. I think regionalization is very important. I think some people think that regionalization should be cost saving. It's not always cost saving, but in my experience, it's always resource building and building that knowledge from the ground up.
So one of the benefits, whoever inherits, whoever we appoint to be town manager, you get a great staff that's in place. But there is you need to have some succession planning for that staff, and then backfilling, and of course we were looking at perhaps new hires over time. So what do you look for in terms of characteristics of an employee to make sure that we hire the best that we have and can then develop them to become future department heads? And then also, is it your sort of philosophy of developing internally and promoting candidates, or is it to look outside for new blood?
Great, thank you. I was able to touch upon this a little bit in my essay, but I'm thankful for the question and thankful to answer that for you today. In my experience, we have seen both promoting from within as well as bringing from the outside as being beneficial. I think that it's important from the outset that traditionally in municipal government, each department head wanted to keep all of their knowledge to themselves. They didn't want to share it. They thought that it was very important for them to know and no other one, or they might lose their job or do something else. But my philosophy is that we should all be sharing knowledge. We should be bringing people up. Department heads should be looking internally to see if they have leaders and potential future managers within their department and bringing that up to the town manager to have those discussions over the course of time. Over my training, I have been in several leadership courses that have been very onerous and tedious and in-depth. And I have learned that it's very important to spot a leader or a good manager in either your organization or in interviews, and you can always train them on certain tasks if they don't know those tasks or operations. But it's very hard to find someone who is the expert in all areas and not as open in those leadership and managerial characteristics. So I think I would take a two-pronged approach to backfilling any retirements or vacancies, that there might be great candidates internally to bring up, and it's my job as the manager and the department head working together to give that person the tools to move up and to understand. But there also might be opportunities or areas where an external view would be very important for the town and for that department, and it's really on a case-by-case basis. It's not a formula that could be used.
How do you, if you're selected as town manager, how would you view your role vis-a-vis the board and the five of us, excuse me, and what happens when you have an opinion on a particular issue that conflicts with or differs from that of the board, and how would you handle that?
Sure. So first and foremost, you're the appointing authority. You are on the ground, you live in the community, you are representing the town, you have been elected. So that's very important to understand. I would want to understand from each of you how you like to communicate, how you like to receive feedback, how you would like to give me feedback, what are your top button issues? Why did you run for board member? What are you seeing out in the community? I would also want to understand what is the history of the board been in terms of, does all communication come through the chair, or do each individual board member reach out to the manager and communicate what their needs or wants are? So I think that would be where I would start, very open and honest conversations. To your question about what would happen if I had an opinion or a recommendation that the board did not agree upon, or agree to or think was right, I think that's okay. I think that's where constructive work really occurs, when you have differing thoughts or opinions and you work back and forth and you understand what yours, the board's view might be, and what my view might be, and do we need to bring in a different expert to understand, or can we work this out together, or do we just put that on the back burner and work on something else and then come back to it in the future?
Thank you.
It's very interesting that part of your current portfolio is economic development. Our very hardworking Economic Development Committee, I think, finds it a challenge with the sort of changes that are happening in our office space and vacancy and usage to know what the biggest bang for the buck is. So I just wanted to ask, in your experience in Shrewsbury, what are the things that you've seen the greatest return on in terms of supporting and developing your business partners?
Sure. So I think, similar to Westford, Shrewsbury is struggling with economic development in terms of a topic. So it's such a large topic. What does it actually mean? It means something different to everyone. What we are seeing success in is that the town of Shrewsbury has two business associations. We have the Lakeway Business Association that services business owners along the Route 9 corridor in Shrewsbury. It's a membership organization, and they really advocate for each other and bring businesses together. We also have the Town Center Association, and we're working on a very large revitalization of the town center right now. We went through a rezoning effort in 2020. We are permitting and selling a old school for redevelopment of 55 housing units and 7,000 square feet of commercial retail space and additional town parking. And we really see that benefit between the association and the town. The town of Shrewsbury also has what's called the Shrewsbury Development Corporation, which was built upon the Devon's Enterprise Commission, which it's a member board of appointments from the select board, and the Shrewsbury Development Corporation can buy and sell land they can bond, they can market, and we actually just sold a Town of Shrewsbury piece of land through the Shrewsbury Development Corporation for commercial industrial development. So we have several tools in the toolbox, but we still too are working on an economic development strategy and trying to understand what areas of town we should focus on and what industries we should focus on. And with the market changing so quickly, retail and restaurant versus office, decline of office has been quite substantial in the past 3.5 years. Where do you go? And it's really finding those experts who work throughout the country to be consultants to the town or to work with the organizations to understand how to move forward.
Thank you.
So, the town manager obviously establishes a lot of relationships with individuals in the community, builds trust, and sometimes people might ask for favors or ask to be sort of exceptions to the rule. How would you protect the town manager's office from politics and kind of those different agendas?
Sure. Well, I think first and foremost, it's sticking to our state ethics law, understanding what we can't do related to favors, obviously. I think it's also understanding where the issues are coming from, who's bringing those politics to the table. Again, like I said, understanding you as select board members first and foremost. Would you rather have these conversations with the public or with a concerned citizen rather than the manager's office, who should be working on the day-to-day operations of the town to make sure that the town of Westford is operating in the best way it can be? Thanks. Welcome.
Any other questions?
Well, actually, yeah, so Westford's a town of 23,000 thereabouts people. We still think we're a small town. So the town manager is not just, a professional business person, which of course they are, but they're also a face in the community. So I was, if you could sort of describe your involvement in Shrewsbury personally, and how that might or may not translate to Westford.
Sure, absolutely. I joke all the time that I spend more time in Shrewsbury than I do in my own town. And I shared at the meeting last week that the town of Shrewsbury had a Yuletide festival last Saturday evening, which I brought my family to, and we enjoyed and saw a lot of faces of the community. I do my shopping mostly in the town of Shrewsbury to get out and about and see what's going on there. I think that it's very important for the manager to be out with the groups, the community groups, be going to the ball fields and seeing the kids play, be going to any types of concerts or organizations that they can, to be out there and be seen, to make sure that they are shown that they're invested within that community. Also, you don't hear everything when you're in your four walls of your office. You need to really get out and go get a coffee at the local coffee shop and kind of hear the chatter that's going on, or drive the roads of the town and see what's being worked on, what construction projects are ongoing, and interface in that way. So I see myself in the community a lot. I see benefits of being out there, building trust with those members, that you're just not sitting there in the office directing people what to do. That's not the right way to operate business. You really should be out and about and interacting with the residents and understanding what hardships they're seeing or what struggles they're going through, or what successes are occurring in the town as well, and celebrating those if possible.
Thanks.
I have that bond rating one. Is that okay?
Of course.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
How have you been involved in your town's achieving its current bond rating? Could you
Sure.
describe your individual actions towards that?
Absolutely. So we're very proud as Westford. Shrewsbury is a AAA bond-rated community. We have been since 2019. I am very participatory in the process in preparing for the bond rating calls. I am collecting data with my staff related to new growth in terms of job creation, in terms of economic activity, understanding what practices we have done related to fiscal planning and revenue projections, and putting those presentations together with my team. And then when we, as the town of Shrewsbury, switched from Moody's to Standards & Poor's, we held a meeting with Standards & Poor's within the town of Shrewsbury. I personally reached out to business owners and community groups to sit in the room with Standards & Poor's with us to present. We prepared a full PowerPoint presentation, and I was a portion of giving that presentation. And then every time we do go to borrow or to get rated again, I do participate on those calls advance of that, I participate with my team to prepare for those calls. Thanks.
So this position would be an expansion in scope. Is there any challenge that rises to the top when you think about going from the broad portfolio you have now to kind of the complete town portfolio?
What challenges would I see in entering that?
Yeah, like if you heard later today that you had the job, what are the things you'd want to go quickly investigate because it's new?
Sure. I think that very upfront, I would want to understand your finance director's role and their breadth of work. I see that is my area of most area that needs improvement the most, to understand the financial realm of that. I think that understanding all of the departments would be quite easy to get a hold of, because I do have a breadth of knowledge of all of the departments throughout the town of Shrewsbury. And I think it's also just coming up to speed of what your practices and traditions are. Every town operates a little bit differently. The traditions are a little bit different. And also very important would be getting up to speed for town meeting. That's coming up very quickly, setting your warrant. I spent a lot of time last night looking at the fiscal '24 budget, because I think that was just released yesterday. So understanding those would be the top priority.
Thanks. Do one more?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, as you probably know, Westford's engaged in pretty aggressive goals to get to be carbon zero community by 2050.
Yes.
And that involves a lot of planning to get there. So, I guess, what have you been doing in Shrewsbury that would help translate to Westford in terms of getting our knowledge base and making us get there better?
Absolutely. A few things. The town of Shrewsbury benefits from having a public light plant, so Selco, Shrewsbury Electric Light and Cable Operations, so we don't have National Grid or Eversource. And they have a goal of going carbon neutral by 2030. So the general manager and the Selco offices are within the town hall, and we're frequently talking with them about how they're changing their portfolio and changing their efforts. We have been working with them to place electric vehicle charging stations at various town properties. I see you have a myriad of charging stations outside, which is great. And I was also involved in writing a grant through our Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program to prepare a climate action plan for the town of Shrewsbury. The town of Shrewsbury also authorized town meeting appropriation for that climate action plan, and we're currently ongoing through that with the consultant at this time. So those are some of the areas where I would be able to further those efforts for the town of Westford.
Is there a committee in Shrewsbury that works for that? Because Westford has, you probably know. I was curious if Shrewsbury had a similar construct.
We do not have a committee at this time. We have a working group working with the consultant on that climate action plan. It's really an outside group. They call themselves Shrewsbury 01545, that they're moving forward their climate efforts, but we meet with them very frequently.
Last question.
Sure.
If you are selected as town manager, you're following in the footsteps of a town manager who is highly respected, who has been very accessible and very involved in our community. As a result, you can probably expect to, at least in the start, to face comparison to her, and from staff, from residents, from people who've interacted with her. How will you go about handling that? And what will you do to establish your own management and leadership presence and style?
Sure. Well, the town has been certainly very fortunate to have such a long-time manager. That's not often the case within municipal government. So congratulations to your town for having such a long-term manager. I think what is important for me to come in is to have the best attitude possible, to be encouraging to all employees, to actually take those thoughts and criticisms and reflect upon them. What was the past manager doing well? What were they doing that might be needing to be modernized or to be updated? And also to act very methodically and not make changes quite quickly. I think that's important to understand. I think also, because I have not been a manager before, I'll be paving the way for what my official town manager hat is, how I will plan to lead and manage the town of Westford, and learning that through the process alongside with the staff. But I think it's being as respectful as possible and being as open and honest with the staff and with the residents and business owners who have been so accustomed to this. Change is not easy. some people deal with it better than others, and just being as cordial and honest as possible.
Great. Do you have any questions for us,
I
Kristen?
do. I have a lot of notes that I've been compiling over the past few days. I have a few kind of broader questions. What elements of town hall pandemic work or pandemic operations do you hope would stay for the town of Shrewsbury, town of Westford employees?
So these are things we adopted during the pandemic.
That you might wish to stay, continue?
Well, I have one thing that I think we've chatted about before, which is really integrating Zoom or something like Zoom, I think is helpful because it lets us be a lot more inclusive of town staff. I'm thinking of many of the evening meetings that we have. I think having public access through a digital means just improves accessibility. Having be interactive would be very helpful. And I think it's important that town staff, I think it's easier on town staff that need to be monitoring something or maybe will be called on to ask a question, not to necessarily need to be here from 6 o'clock till 10 o'clock to be physically available. So I think the whole embracing of digital access has been good, and I think we probably have more to do there. So I'm not, maybe that's something, we talk about with the new town manager is there some next level we can go to bring more people to the table?
Thank you.
I have the same, that was the first thing I thought
That's-
of,
yeah,
just
I
like
think
hybrid
that's what we
meetings.
all thought
Yeah.
of.
Yeah. But I guess I would also think about safety, right? Physical safety and stuff for our staff, because who are here in person. Jody really promoted in-person customer service. She was like, the services needed to be delivered in person.
Sure.
So it was kind of maintaining that physical, mental safety and stuff for our staff members. I had another thought, but I forgot.
I guess, I think that's the big thing in terms of what we'd keep. I think the thing I might change is we all got the habit, myself included at home, is it's easier to call or Zoom than to get together in person. But if we're all in town together, there's, I think, productivity. There's good interpersonal relationships. If you're in person, you can read body language. You can actually see the smile better than you can on the camera.
Right.
And I think you're probably more open to dialogue than you are when okay, I have to raise my hand now. You can't just speak up. So I'd like to see us get back to more in-person. You're doing the work day with staff, and then I think with the boards and stuff as well in the evenings.
Great, thank you.
I noticed you led the COVID-19 response.
I did.
For Shrewsbury?
Yes.
So what are you looking for?
I'm sorry, say that again?
In your question, what are you looking for?
So I led the response in terms of how we were keeping our community safe, how we were having our protocols for our town staff, work from home, remote options. I think what I'm looking for is what did we learn during the pandemic that was beneficial, that is good to move forward, to be more flexible with staff in certain areas. Are there positions that can work remotely? Are there positions that absolutely cannot? What values did we learn from ourselves and our families throughout the pandemic to make the work culture even better for the town of Westford?
What's the answer, John?
I mean, I think those are all really good
I think
questions.
those are all really good questions, and I think
And they don't have to be
something-
answered today.
No, because they're not going to be answered today, to be perfectly honest. But I think those are all really good questions, and I think it's an assessment and an analysis that we really haven't undertaken and we haven't done yet. That probably moving forward, that we should take a look at and see what we've learned from and what we can implement and and also what didn't work. I think is also important to understand.
I think I'd like to see more involvement of the local health department in some of this, because the way they handled the pandemic, I mean, it was the regional centers and everything else, and we needed it more local. And moving forward, I think that would be a good thing.
I think there's something else too, which is sort of town, not just really the town,
Right.
but other
Right.
organizations in town. A lot of organizations got really hit hard and shocked by the pandemic and are trying to find their way forward from
Right.
here. So I'm thinking of a lot of the churches and a lot of the other civic volunteer organizations, our Westford Business Association, a lot of things that used to have a regular, pretty well-attended, pretty, gathering place, a lot of social function. have been shocked and set back. And I think we need to figure out what the new world looks like and which of those are going to reconstitute in some way and which are not going to come back. So I think there's a lot of civic kind of fabric questions that I think we're struggling with.
I'd like to get back to in-person select board meetings.
Would you like to make a motion?
I'm glad that's coming out right now. What is your philosophy on the use of town council, and how do you use town council?
I think our philosophy is that when any board or this board or any other board needs an opinion from town council, that it does go through the town manager's office before approaching town council, just so that town council is not getting calls from 12 different people every single day. But we have a very open relationship with our town council. It's KP Law, and if anybody has a legal question, we want to be in front of that and not behind it. And so we've got a really open and I think flexible policy with our town council. We also we work with a couple of different people at KP Laws, depending upon what the issue is.
Sure.
If somebody on planning, from the permitting office, or somebody from public safety, has a question and wants to consult with town council, as I said, just go through the town manager's office.
Even our committees, we're all on multiple committees,
Yeah.
and a lot of those are just, they're citizens who don't understand town government and what the mass general laws might allow. So, they're encouraged as well. It's call town manager and get her to ask the right questions and get the answers so we proceed correctly.
Great. No, we have a similar philosophy. We use Myrick O'Connell out of Worcester, and they're a full-service firm. We have one lead town council, but we have access to whatever we need related to that, so very comfortable.
Actually, Myrick O'Connell is our labor council.
Okay, great. Yes, very
Labor
familiar
and
with them.
employment.
Yes, great. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Just one other question, if I may.
Yes.
Obviously, incoming town manager after 14 years, a new person, how would you all see yourselves probably onboarding the new manager and making sure that new manager is set off for success, other than what the manager would do as a proactive way to set themselves up for success?
Well, the one process we lean on, which just described earlier today, is a pretty thoughtful goal-setting process. So once the candidate is on board and feels comfortable, and we'd all, I'm sure, value face-to-face discussions to get to know the new town manager better. But we would then go through a pretty deliberate and thoughtful goal-setting process that would be very participatory, and so there would be no surprise, be very, very clear what the expectations were, and we would just kind of keep coming back to it. We probably wouldn't do that the first day. We'd probably make sure that someone had a chance to feel comfortable and know
We'll give you a week.
know where the bathroom is.
That's great.
Yeah. But I think it would just be the starting of the communication process that would be routine.
And I think the other thing, and this comes from all of us, is we would like to set a tone with whomever the new town manager is that, if you've got questions, where are things, where does this stand? Where do I find this?
Right.
Is to start that early communication between us and to hopefully make whoever the new town manager is comfortable with either calling the chair or anybody else to look for that kind of information and that kind of help.
So what I would just add is, to the town staff,
Yes.
I've been through 4 acquisitions. Every time you're worried about is your job there, change is never fun, and so I understand where our town staff is coming from with whoever it is going to be a change, and just to really encourage staff to, if they're listening, to understand that it's changed. It's not better or worse. It's just different, and to be open and honest with you in terms of what they enjoy and don't enjoy about their jobs, and just make sure I saw you're showing communications in here, and you communicate with people as they themselves prefer to be communicated with, and I think if that's, the two-way street's open, it'll be fine.
I think the other thing we would do too is help build sort of a network or roadmap of community organizations and individuals that would be good over some period of time for you to go have coffee with or meet or whatever. I think that's something we would be good at. I think we would be pretty differential to how the town manager would like to onboard internally with staff.
Sure, right.
But I think we could be very helpful in making a bridge to all the different community members that you'd want to know.
Great. So my answer, my thought was more of a little bit like more one-on-one. Like if you were to call us individually, what would that advice look like? And maybe this is like a selfish answer because it's not a collective board answer. But, I'm really thinking, we're looking for someone who can lead and drive
Right.
and manage the town.
Right.
Right. So, and it's really, these like interviews today is really to have people shine and show that their leadership, show their personality. So that's something that the trust can build, the community can build trust around, right? So I feel like when you're talking about onboarding and sort of advice or something for the select board, we're absolutely available here to answer any questions, but we definitely want the town manager to build their role, build their tone, build their culture for the staff and for the community. And I don't think any of us want to hinder that at all. So we definitely want to empower that person coming in and have them flourish in terms of what their drive and leadership skills are. And really, the select board can come and go, right? And so it's really the leadership of the town manager that needs to be stable. And so it's kind of trying to think through, what sort of culture do you want to build in town hall?
Great.
That's my advice.
Thank you.
Do you want to add anything?
Oh, I was sitting here thinking about that.
Okay.
I think, well, first of all, I think the town staff's gonna be very welcoming of whoever we choose. And that you kind of handle. I know the way you laid it out, you're gonna have a lot of, meetings and stuff.
Yeah, you have to. You have
I
to
know.
understand what's going on.
I think just being available to you and let you know that we're open for any questions you have. If you need to have something smoothed over or get into something and you're not getting the type of cooperation, let us know that.
Thank
But
you.
just, we'd be here to help you make that transition.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you
for
so
coming
much.
in again.
I know it's a very busy time of year, and I appreciate you all spending time with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck with your conversations.
Thanks.
Since deliberation is scheduled at 1, do you want to have a 5-minute break? Or?
Yeah. Why don't we take a 5-minute break before we start our discussion? First of all, I want to thank all of the candidates who took their time to apply for the town manager position here. We greatly appreciate the time you took, the effort that you made, and particularly for the 3 folks who became the finalists here today. The board recognizes all of the time and the effort that you put into both from the very beginning, from your applications through the interview processes with both the search committee and then here today before the select board, as well as all of the research that you've all done into our community. We as a board are grateful for all of your hard work and your interest in us. So that being said, we have a difficult decision to make. We have 3 qualified candidates today who we've met, and all of them are certainly well qualified. But at the end of the day, we have to make a decision, and we do have to choose or appoint one of them to be our next town manager. And I just want to say up front that whatever our decision is, it is for the 2 people who may not be selected, it is no reflection on their abilities or their qualifications, but it's rather based on our overall assessment of who we think is going to be best for Westford and to lead it forward. But it doesn't reflect your capabilities and abilities at all for whomever we do not select. All of you are well qualified, and as I said, we are appreciative of everything that you've done in terms of this whole application process and your expressed interest and enthusiasm for Westford and for this position. So with that introduction, And I'm hopeful that through our discussion that we actually will come to a consensus among us as we move forward. So with that introduction, I don't know who wants to start, or?
Could I start by thanking the search subcommittee for providing this embarrassment of riches that we have here? 3 very strong candidates. And there were things I really liked about each one. I liked Matt's experience from multiple perspectives, his fluidity with the subject matter, his sort of rapid access to ideas and suggestions at the very specific level, but also the general level. And I think he had good experience working with staff. I like the fact that he had to recruit in a little bit more challenging environment because of the size of his town. I think that probably built some good muscles in terms of team development and team focus. I think we all have great experience with Eric and the services that he provides, and I've been on many committees and seen his excellent work, his excellent product management work. I felt like many of his answers were a little bit more on the surface level and not sort of diving down periodically into the meat of the answer. I thought he gave a good, thoughtful answer to my school's question. I think it's a real advantage for the 2 other candidates that they have the amount of line management experience that they have working with department heads and managing department heads. And that's something that I think Eric has not yet developed. So that's in my thinking. I like Kristen for a lot of the same reasons as Matt. Really fluid with the subject matter, lots of good specifics. I liked her energy kind of when it came to community. She had sort of a forward-leaning feel on a lot of the topics that are near and dear to us. Has led action committees on a number of the things that I know as a community really care about. So I'm interested to know what the rest of the committee's thinking. Right now I'm I think focusing on a hard choice between Matt and Kristen.
Okay.
So I guess I remember when we were interviewing for fire chief, you had to pick one candidate, but I remember Tom McEnany, the former police chief, saying, that guy will be a chief someday. That guy will be a chief someday. And so I think whoever we pick today, or don't pick, the other 2 will be town managers someday. These are all great candidates. So it's as Tom says, it's up to us to have an embarrassment of riches. And thanks again to that search committee who put together a lot of hours of work to get to a point where we had, 3 really good candidates. I guess taking them in order, Matt clearly has been a functional town manager in Tingsboro that came across with the experience. I think his answers were probably the closest you would find to technically correct by the book answers for a town manager, and great candidate. Eric, I think he had that protection with the town. I think he was the best that we had on sustainability and good on the schools. I think he had some very, very strong points there. As with Tom, I do think that the experience that he hasn't quite had yet in the line means he's not quite as deep in terms of examples as the other 2 candidates. And then Kristen, I started a little bit concerned with the overwise, you probably could tell from my questions, but as it went on, it's clear that she is open to communicating and learning and doing things in some best combination of what she feels is best and what the town of Westford and its staff and residents and select board want. And so it is a very tough choice between Kristen and Matt, and I guess to say, in the end, it is really kind of splitting hairs, but there just seemed to be this sort of natural dialogue at the end with Kristen, like, we're almost talking, as a team already. So I just seem that there's somehow I don't know if it was just me, but it seems more of a connectivity, perhaps, of the board with that one candidate, but I don't think we can go wrong with any of them.
Well, I was leaning more, after looking at that, Matt was definitely polished, has the experience, answered the questions very smoothly. Eric, a little bit more rigid, I think, in his responses. I like his experience. I think his experience in facilities and the experience working with Jody. Kristen, I liked Kristen and her experience, but I don't think it's broad enough yet. I'm not sure that I would, you know, go, I'm just trying to see the way forward there. Have to do a lot of catching up. And to me, Matt would have that, be better at that, so.
So I guess I'm kind of in agreement with all of you where Matt and Kristen have that advantage of the experience of managing, right? And so that came through really clearly in their responses, and just Eric, due to the nature of his role and the structure that we have, doesn't have that same type of experience that he'd be able to bring to the table. So I, obviously, everyone here knows, I asked a lot of questions about the DEI stuff, and I think what's important for me is that, and I'm kind of back and forth between Matt and Kristen too, but I'm thinking about the thought process, the mindset, the humility, and just the openness to trying to figure out how to work through a problem. So like the scenarios are important to me because I want to understand how would they address that? Where's the people skills? Where's the soft skills? Legal, training, all of those things that so Matt hit on sensitivity to privacy, potentially discipline, talked really specifically about what those communication responses could be. And Kristen's first response was, we're going to do training. Let's do that first. And I appreciated both of their responses to that. Eric's response was very, I don't want to say rigid, but it was like swift action. And I'm like, wow, that's the people skills part that I feel like would come with the experience of managing, wasn't able to shine through as brightly with his answer there. But in general, I kind of go back and forth of, and I've said this from day one, like I don't want to train a town manager, but Kristen has a lot of experience. She has a lot of the management experience. She has an incredible, she was so natural. All of those answers coming through, like they were very thoughtful. They were very complete. And I think the experience that she has, I kind of go back and forth of those advantages that Matt has as a current town administrator are those things that Kristen could quickly build. Or I feel like it's more about mindset and leadership vision than skills right now in my mind.
If I could just add to that.
Yeah.
So the exact same questions, and that's what that was the exactly correct answer. Here is the process. Here's the privacy concerns. Here is, and it's all wonderful, absolutely correct. But I don't think Kristen was saying the first issue is training. I think she's saying, I don't know what your level of training is, and you have
Right.
degrees of reaction to somebody depending upon what they should or should not know. But she's the only one, I think, who said, well, I want to know actually what happened, because was this actually an overt incident that is serious, or was this somebody just plain isn't very well understanding, correct sensitivities and needs to be. I think she had a better take on is this employee redeemable or not, right? They're both great. I just think that little extra layer, I think, was in her favor.
Yeah.
I agree with that point.
I didn't mean to say that she went straight to training, but just the idea of in the end, this is human service, right? It's social services. And so they're you can't not talk about that human side. And so you can't not want to investigate and not understand really what's really happening. And I feel like, not that I'm going to compare it to Jody, who I know is watching, but she does take a lot of, she does investigate very thoroughly, right? To really understand and just know that the truth is always somewhere in the middle. And so I felt like Matt was very textbook in his response, and hers had a little bit more, I don't want to say depth, because Matt's had depth too, but,
It was just a
different answer.
different angle and a different perspective, and that needs to be considered. So I certainly agree with what you have all said in terms of Matt and Eric and Kristen. Eric has done a wonderful job for the town of Westford. His commitment to sustainability has been terrific. He has really led the community in sustainability. he has, I forget the number, he told the search committee, but everybody should know that we have had, I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars of grants that Eric has led and achieved for this town. And, you know, I don't know that everybody in the town knows that, but it should be something that's out there, and it is a credit to Eric for all the hard work that he did in obtaining those grants. But as I think has been mentioned, sort of where he still falls a little bit below the other two candidates is in the line management, in the personnel management, in the budget, in facilitating the budget. Well, I know that he has participated in budget discussions and sat in on the budget discussions. I think that his, you know, his experience is a little bit less than Matt and Kristen. So as for, also, you know, like my fellow board members, I think it does come down to a choice between Kristen and Matt. And I mean, both of them have qualities that I like about each of them, and it's sort of like if I could take qualities from Matt and qualities from Kristen and then create my own new person, we would have the perfect town manager. Unfortunately, I can't do that, so I'm left with having to make a very hard decision between the two of them. And I think for me, what it comes down to is some of those soft skills and those people skills, because I think technically, operationally, they are both well qualified, and they could both, from an operational perspective, run this town. So it comes down to those soft skills for me, those people skills, those social skills, those reaching out skills, those kinds of things. And I guess, you know, to sort of start to make a decision, okay, and to start the ball rolling for the discussion. For me, it comes down to Kristen, who I think has those skills. And I also liked the part of her which she said, I'm still learning, and I'm learning every day. And I think that's important, because I think all of us in whatever position we are learning every day. And to be open to that and to understand that, I think is very important. And that's not to say that Matt isn't doing that either, but, you know, at the end of the day, it sort of comes down to, you know, those kinds of things. And for me, I just, Kristen at least demonstrated those to me a little bit more than Matt. So that's where I'm coming from.
If I could make two other observations.
Yeah.
So first is, you know, as with this process, I looked at these candidates and looked at their backgrounds. It's clear that Westford's assigned duties to the assistant town manager aren't as deep, perhaps, as they are in Shrewsbury. And so whoever we pick as town manager, I think, needs to reassess the role of assistant town manager to really improve that, you know, their ability to get a town manager job, because they need to get more responsibilities that they don't have now. And then secondly, yeah, I agree with John, sort of the weaker point of Kristen is that budget process side, and she had, you know, admitted that herself. This is where I really want to thank, you know, Andrea and Jody, because Jody had, I know, wanted to retire earlier, and we asked her to stay a little bit longer so we could get the budget rough draft done and not leave that in the hand of somebody who didn't know the town and didn't know process. And so I appreciate the fact that she did stay to get that done. And I think that with that process started, and with a very strong staff in our finance and tax collector departments, that Kristen can pick up what she needs to pick up in three short months. But yeah, thanks to everybody.
And just interacting to both of your points, so it's definitely an advantage for Matt that he already has the full scope across all the town departments, as you say. So if I was comparing, you know, the risk with that versus, I think, some of the advantages in community outreach and community presence that I got the feeling from for Kristen, she's shown a lot of ability to absorb new departments, shed departments, and change her role. So I don't have a lot of concern about her ability to onboard with the new departments. I understand the concern, but I think she's demonstrated that she has taken over new responsibilities as her job has shifted and moved, and seems to have done that very successfully. So I think overall, in terms of doing the work, I think both Matt and Kristen would be great. But I think probably the best example was the one that you gave, Anita, which is his response to like a human hurt problem was really to list the procedure, which is not a bad thing to have. You need to have a procedure. And her reaction was more, we need those things, but we also have to understand what happened. We have to acknowledge that a lot of things that in this category are because we don't have adequate training. We're not going to go discipline first. We're going to investigate, and we're going to understand what the needs are and be training first. So I like that approach, and I think that works well with a lot of the challenges that we and every other community are facing today. So I would also move to the side of Kristen.
So I'm like, okay, so I'm still kind of on the edge on this, and I know that we have 3 right now. But, so I think about how, I mean, you, Scott, were saying, like, you had questions about the override and, like, the budget process, and we do have a really strong financial director, and I think about, like, everyone talks about how strong our department heads are, but what about the retention of those? I kind of worry about that and stuff in general. But I just want to make sure that for those skills that she doesn't have and can't hit the ground running, which it might be a similar concern that John has, that, how are we going to train those, like, budget things right away when, like, we have annual town meeting in a couple of months. And and I know they're very capable people, but, like, I wouldn't want to, you can have a really nice person who isn't the right fit for their job. And I'm not saying she's not a good fit, because I think she's excellent, but that's just what I worry about in general. And Matt does have those textbook answers, but at the same time, that's good, because you don't want feelings in this. This is about policies, and this is about how, what's right or what's wrong, what's legal, because it's the feelings that I think sometimes drives decisions. And, like, I feel like when you're managing people, it shouldn't be about just feelings. It should be about what's right or wrong, what's legal. So that's what I liked about his textbook answers. But then I liked hers because it has the heart, which I know you have to marry both.
Right, I was just going to say, I agree with you partly, but
Yeah.
also I think there needs to be also, there is some
I know.
feelings. There's understanding of your staff, your employees, where are they coming from? Why did they act the way they did? Why did they say what they said? Those kinds of things. And I think you have to be sensitive to that as well.
And also, I think from her answers, she did give a lot of evidence of, systematic thinking, thorough planning,
Yeah.
moving through the items. So I didn't get the sense that she was missing the ability to go through the systematic response.
Yeah.
It was more that, you have to have that, and you have to say, I want to know the truth of what happened, and I want to, have a solution in mind.
Right. And really, it's not like I don't like, I thought they were both excellent, right? Or all 3.
We have a
I know,
really
but one other thing is, like, people who aren't here right now, who might be watching or not watching, are they going to have the same patience if there's like if there's that growth curve that I know would happen with anybody taking over Jody's position? But if they, what's the patience of the community in that learning curve, and in what areas, right? So if it's like learning the town culture, there's a lot of patience for that. But is there like any sort of the administrative operational things, which I know they're both very qualified, is there anything that the town, and I don't have the answer for this, would not be patient with? Like, you should know this as a town manager, as someone who has experience coming here, this is something I should not have to teach you, from like department head to the town manager, and I don't know what those answers are, but I'm trying to think, I just want to make sure, we're thinking that way too.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Well, to me, Matt comes out ahead of those two, in the sense that I think he's been on the firing line. He's making the decisions to make the town go forward, Tingsboro. I think Kristen, a lot of good answers you said on the soft skills and stuff, but she was a town planner to begin with, and I think her range is a little bit limited in that regard. And I think between the two, I think Matt would be my choice, in the sense that I think he has that experience of being a town manager, even though a smaller town. And I think that's something that Kristen's lacking in. It's just the limitations of her experience.
So, go ahead.
I have one more thought, and something I really appreciated about Kristen's answer, I don't remember what the question was. Oh, it was my question about politics and people trying to sway the town manager, and her first response was state ethics. And that was one of the things that I had a concern about, I think, when I was talking to Buzz in my one-on-one conversation, to just kind of prep for this whole process in general. Like, how do we protect the town manager's office from politics, from hidden agendas that folks might have in town, because everyone has things that they're interested in. And he was like, well, Buzz's first answer was state ethics, whatever that thing is. And that was her first answer. And I so appreciated that, because I'm like, that's exactly what I want to know, that you've got the integrity to think about the ethics of the position, and like, it's not about, something. Anyways, I just wanted to say I really, really appreciated that.
So I guess, John, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I respectfully disagree.
Okay.
I do think that she has experience beyond just land use and planning, and I think, she talked about it, with health, human resources. Yes, she hasn't done a budget herself, but she has sat in all the budget discussions. She's been part of collective bargaining. I do think DPW, I believe she said, was under her management for a while as well. So I do think she has the broad experience that she could come in here and be a town manager.
Well, I guess one thought, which is on the negative economic development, which if I think about the town's challenges going forward, and actually Matt hit upon it as well, which is your taxable base only moves so much, and the needs expand faster. And how do you make that up? Well, one is overrides, but another one is growth. And I think if we think about Route 110, which is going to be our primary commercial corridor, you've got Littleton looking at adding a whole new, very attractive complex, on 110, on top of the point. We had to be thinking ourselves about how do we make our own 110 corridor attractive. And I think she's got some practical skills there that can help Westford. That Route 9 has had that sort of same kind of transformation of use. So I think she may have some skill sets there that may compensate for some of the budget stuff. And you can learn the budget from, I think, people. It's harder to learn how do you redevelop some properties.
One thing that's not necessary in everyone's vote is their own, but I've been through a previous process like this, and it is a useful message if it's a unanimous decision. It doesn't have to be, but just sends a good message to the incoming candidate. And it sounds like we have three votes for Kristen. I know we're all open to thinking and learning, and if we feel like we're ready to approach a vote, maybe we can have a little bit, see if there's any other questions or points that people want to make. And
I'm gonna be really honest, and it's so weird to have a conversation in front of people, but I don't want anyone to feel bullied or whatever into making a vote, to make it look unanimous. Mm-hmm. And I think that unanimous votes are, obviously, this is a really important vote and stuff, but if I'm okay with it not being unanimous, I guess in the end is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely, and I also, let me reiterate, I don't want anyone to feel bullied into supporting a candidate whom they really don't support. So, yes, let me emphasize that to everybody, okay?
Well, and I believe we hired Jody with a 3-2 vote, so.
I think we did too.
Okay, so,
Okay. Well, I mean, I really like both of them so much, and I am really torn. Kristen was an excellent interviewer. Like, she was, I think about interview skills, and the different communication styles that they presented today in the interview were very different. And I do think about who's going to unify the community, who can everyone look to, right, for those pieces. And I appreciated Kristen mentioning her project with the police. She talked about the project with the school. I don't know. She hit all sorts of departments and in her different answers to really show her breadth of, I think, experience in working with everyone. And it, to me, really showed like a sense of community. And I do appreciate how Shrewsbury is a larger town than Westford. And if we're thinking about the whole economic development piece, where that's going to go, and if there are learnings from Shrewsbury that she could help apply here to Westford, if you're thinking about growing the 110 corridor to be something not like Route 9, but just no, yeah. Like, I don't think we want that
we
here.
don't want
Yeah.
Route 9, and we don't want,
Yeah.
129 in Milford.
But there are properties that could be turned to something of a higher value.
And I know I'm not really answering your question about where I'm going to be, but I just think I really appreciate that Matt understands the community. He was here before. He understands kind of like an answer that he had. That I don't know if we can talk about it since it was during the first interview, but we were talking about like, what are your, where do you envision Westford's going to be in the next 5 years, or what do you think is going to be a big issue? And his response was just the sense of community and sort of old and new. And I thought that was really thoughtful, and I thought that was really true. And so I appreciated that he understood that part about the community, that there is that here. And but then, I know I'm just gonna. I appreciate that Kristen's new, right? Nobody knows Kristen. There's no baggage. There's not that there's baggage with Matt, but I appreciate that about her too. But anyway.
Anybody else have any other thoughts they want to share at this point? Okay,
I'm
so.
preparing to make a motion.
Okay, so
And
Tom is preparing to make a motion.
I want to make sure I get this exactly right, so I'm just taking a look here. Okay. I move to authorize MRI to make a conditional offer of employment to Kristen D. Lass for the position of Westford Town Manager. This offer is conditional, I think it probably should say. This offer is conditional upon the satisfactory background review and investigation conducted by MRI and the successful negotiation of the terms of appointment by the Select Board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. We actually don't have to poll because we're not on Zoom, but I think for the benefit of everybody who's watching, we probably should announce our votes individually. So I will start, okay, and I won't put anybody on the spot to be first, so I will start as chair, and I will vote in favor of the motion.
I'll also vote in favor.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
All right, we have a 4-to-1 vote to offer employment to Kristen Lass. What will happen next, actually, is our consultants will relay the decision here of the board to all of the candidates, and they will start their background and investigation of Kristen, and we will, in conjunction with that at the same time, we'll also start contract negotiations with her. And also, I think the first question that we need to ask her is her date of availability, so that what is her availability? As everybody knows, Jody's last day here is, I believe, December 30th, or whatever that Friday is of December, but that is her last day here. And so if we have to have some interim planning before Kristen starts and Jody's departure, then obviously the board will have to discuss that and plan for that as well. So once again, I just want to thank everybody for all of their time and for all of their effort. The board really appreciates it. We had a really tough decision to make, but in some ways, not in some ways, but in a lot of ways, we are fortunate that we had the applicants that we had, and that we were faced with this difficult decision. Not every town can say that, and so we move forward from here. Thank you, everybody, and everybody have a great rest of the weekend.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.